call this meeting to order. The Board of Supervisors of Ventura County for November 25th, 2008. And Roberta, will you do the roll call, please?
Supervisor Long? Here. Supervisor Parks? Here. Supervisor Bennett?
Here.
Supervisor Flynn? And Supervisor Foy?
Here. Supervisor Flynn is out with the flu today, so he won't be joining us. All right, let's do our moment of affirmation with Pastor Tom Stevens.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Thank you.
I'd like to tell you a story and then read something. There was a time when Jesus was walking on the borders of Jerusalem and Galilee. And as he was walking along the borders, he went into a village. And going into the village, he saw 10 men who had leprosy. They had a skin disease. And you might remember that leprosy, people were considered unclean. They were kept outside of everyday society. As he was walking in, they shouted to him, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." It reminds me of when I'm walking down by the river mouth by C Street in Ventura County, and people walk up and ask for some money for homeless. "Will you have mercy on me?" Jesus saw these men, and he said, "Go and show yourself to the priest." And so they went immediately, and as they were on their way going to the temple to show themselves to the priest, one of them recognizes that he's clean, that it's gone. And it says that he turns around and he goes back to the feet of Jesus and he thanks him and he praises God. And listen to Jesus' response to this man who turned around. He says this. He says, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give thanks to God except this foreigner?" Because he was a Samaritan. And then Jesus went on to say, "Your faith has healed you." It reminds me that the other 9 who didn't come back, they were doing their job. They were going and doing what he said. But the one who was able to see the blessing turned around and gave thanks. And it's very easy for us in the midst of a very busy time, in the midst of a very economic downturn, to not remember and to give thanks for that which is still good. One of our greatest civic leaders of our country, Abraham Lincoln, knew this principle. And you might remember on October 3rd, 1863, he stated a proclamation. Now this is in the heat of the Civil War. Tens and thousands of men are dying in battlefields. And it was in October 3rd, 1863 that he said this to our country. And it's a time to remember, even in a very busy and crisis time, to give thanks. And as I read this proclamation from Abraham Lincoln, I want you to listen for what he says thank you for. He will say that he's thankful for, even in the midst of a civil war, other nations haven't attacked because we were weak. He will say, even in the midst of the Civil War, economics continued to progress. He's going to talk about the plow. Even in the midst of the Civil War, we continue to expand our borders. Listen to what he says about our country. And this is our moment of affirmation to remember. He said this, "The year that is drawing towards its close has been filled with the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties, which are so constantly enjoyed, that we are prone to forget the source from which they come. Others have been added which are so extraordinary of nature that they cannot fail to penetrate or soften even the heart, which is habitually insensible to the ever-watchful providence of Almighty God. In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed to foreign states to invite and to provoke their aggression, peace has been preserved with all nations. Order has been maintained, the laws have been respected and obeyed, and harmony has prevailed everywhere except in the theater of military conflict, while that theater there has been contracted by the advancing armies of the navies of the Union. Needful diversions of wealth and of strength from the fields of peaceful industry to that national defense have not arrested the plow, the shuttle, or the ship. The axe has enlarged the borders of our settlements, and the mines, as well of iron and coal and of precious metals, have yielded even more abundantly than heretofore. Population has steadily increased, notwithstanding the waste that has been made in the camp, the siege, and the battlefield, and the country, rejoicing in consciousness of augmented strength and vigor, is permitted to expect continuance of years with large increase of freedom. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, hath nevertheless remembered mercy. Lincoln writes, "It seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly and reverently and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and one voice with the whole American people. I do therefore invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea and those who are sojourning in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens. And I recommend to them that while offering up their aspirations justly due to Him for such singular deliverance and blessings, that they do also with humble penitence for our national perverseness and disobedience, commend to His tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife in which we are now unavoidably engaged, and fervently implore the interposition of the Almighty hand to heal the wounds of a nation and to restore it as soon as may be consistent with the divine purposes to the full enjoyment of peace, harmony, and tranquility and union. In testimony whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the United States to be affixed. Done at the city of Washington, this 3rd day of October, in the year of our Lord, 1863, and the independence of the United States, the 88th. By the President Abraham Lincoln, William H. Seward, Secretary of State. We don't talk that way anymore. To remember that even in the midst of civil strife, we are to see the blessings. And we are so grateful in this county for your work. We know that you have a lot on your agenda today. We know that this is a time where there's a lot of economic uncertainty, and you as our leaders need to make some pretty tough decisions, both with litigation and with economics. And I would just invite you today, in the midst of your work, to remember the blessing, to remember that things are still happening in this county, and that as a result of that, we can give thanks. So I just want to personally thank you for the work that you're doing, and may you be blessed in what you do today.
Pastor, thank you very, very much.
You know, as a 25-year history teacher, I just want to let you know I really appreciated this moment of affirmation today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And why don't we pledge our allegiance to this great flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We okay? Wonderful. Okay, we'll move on to our agenda review.
Yes, Chair Foy. On consent item 11, the agenda title only, it does require a 4/5 vote. Item 16, time certain, we request a continuance to December 16th at 10 a.m. Item 20, time certain item, there has been an additional letter submitted by Friends of Channel Islands Harbor, and that's been distributed. And item 27, the Harbor Department, there's a revised exhibit with the Rincon consultants. So item 27, the Harbor Department, there's a revised. The item 27, or the letter? Okay. Let me see. You haven't received the letter.
Okay. Any other things to the agenda? No? We'll move. Okay, move that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll move to our consent agenda. Items 10 through 15. Any comments, questions, motions? We have a motion. Second. All right, we'll move to public comments. We have one speaker, Lee Quaintance.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Lee Quaintance for the Beacon Foundation. The Beacon Foundation is a nonprofit environmental organization focused on coastal Ventura County. We've been involved in these issues for about 14 years. I'm appearing this morning really to just make a comment on board policy. Specifically the policy as stated in your agenda and always stated in your agenda that limits to a cumulative 5 minutes public comment by any individual or, I guess, organization. You have on your agenda today 6 items that concern the Harbor Department, and it is simply impossible to meaningfully testify on any of them in less than a minute if you want to comment on more than one, which we would have. In view of that, we have decided or have submitted to you this letter, which is on item 27 and also refers to item 29, which we think is the most important of the 6 items on your agenda with respect to the Harbor Department. And the letter we hope will receive your consideration. We see the course of action in the Rincon contract as setting up a train wreck with the Coastal Commission. We hope you will defer action on that item. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all of our speakers, so we'll move on to board comments. Kathy, would you like to start?
Good morning, and thank you. A couple of things I'd like to share with the board. One, the Urban County Caucus, of which we are a part of, and I currently chair the caucus. We've gone through a recruitment process since August, and recently sent out a press release to let the folks in Sacramento and the urban counties know that we have hired Jolena Voorhees as our new executive director. Since 2005, she was a director of legislation at the State Department of Housing and Community Development. She also formerly worked with CSAC, the Department of Conservation, and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. So she comes to us with a wealth of experience and knowledge of what happens across the street, and hopefully she'll help us work our way through the many minefields that are out there over the next year. So I wanted to let you know of that action. Also, I mentioned, I think, at the last meeting or before, that the Community Commission of Ventura County, which is that commission that the board is a participant in, and I serve on as co-chair with Don Coleman, Judge Coleman. We're working on childhood obesity as one of our strategies, and in that we're doing some work with the Diabetes Association, knowing that that is a prominent disease and an issue with obesity. And in that we were invited and participated in a meeting at the Four Seasons Hotel, specifically in their Wellness Institute. And they are very interested in looking at what we're doing with obesity for children and childhood obesity in this county. They are working with some groups in Los Angeles. As an institute, it really does work on nutrition and health and wellness, as opposed to just, it's not a spa. It truly is a health institute. So I want to let you know there's an open house on December 17th that is open to anyone who wishes to attend. You do have to RSVP for it. And the open house is to really get acquainted more with, for the community to get acquainted with the Longevity Institute and the Wellness Center that's there. So I want to let you know that, December 17th. If you'd like more information, I have it. It is open from 5 to 8 p.m. And back to a CSAC. The CSAC conference is next week, and I'll be out next week for that conference. It's in San Diego. And as part of that conference, in addition to the new Supervisors Institute that's been a part of CSAC for years, I went through it, so it's been there a while. There is a new initiative that CSAC is launching. It's called the Institute for Excellence in County Government. And I'm going to provide our CEO more information. I left it downstairs, Marty, on this institute. And it is an institute that's going to be is structured as a true training institute that is reaching out to managers, obviously supervisors, CEOs, where it will offer specific tracks where you can get both credit and particularly for those who need credit for licensing, to get some practical application and training. We're working with, in partnership on this with USC and I forgot the other partner, but there'll be more information at the CSAC conference on it. I'll bring it back, a packet for all of you to see the detailed tracks that are going to be set up for this learning opportunity. It starts in February, and I see it as a practical opportunity to grow our future leaders in public service and public government and public county work. And working with the college, we're going to have professors providing these and practical folks who have been formerly perhaps in county government land who will be part of the faculty. And I'm quite excited about it. It's got quite a multiple tracks for different learning opportunities. So I'll bring that back following the conference, but there will be a session on it at the conference also. And that, adjourn in memory. Folks from the 3rd District, specifically 2, I'd like to call out. 1, Camarillo Ken Gerhardt. I met Mr. Gerhardt when I first moved into the county. He was very active with a group that was reaching out to young high school students and giving them an opportunity in the summer to go and live on CLU's campus and meet with business leaders and learn things about the business community and their interest in the workforce and future business opportunities. Ken was the spearhead behind that for years and just an outstanding man. Enjoyed his passion for working with young students. And then probably some of you know Sherry Rude Klitich. Sherry pursued a career to save the earth. And she, after graduating from the U.S. Soil Conservation Service, consulting on irrigation efficiency, erosion control, and fire remediation in our county, her love of agriculture and passion led her to work with the University of California Hanson Trust, where she was the first administrator on the formation of the Faulkner Farm Hanson Trust project in Santa Paula. And she worked to develop the research and educational projects for the agricultural literacy program there, active in the school garden network and agriculture in the classroom, and was involved in the farm to school program. Fillmore resident, remarkable young woman, and she will be missed. She was loved by many and involved with the Hanson Trust project and the Faulkner Farm, and was just a real passionate, loving woman. So, adjourn in memory. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Parks.
Thank you. I was absent from our board meeting last week to attend the Governor's Global Climate Summit, and I think I accommodated you because you killed me off in the the emergency disaster scenario.
We were very gentle to you. So.
Thank you for that. I didn't notice any grieving or anything. But the Governor's Global Climate Summit was definitely worthwhile attending. And it was nice because we have such a perspective looking at our county, our state, the nation, but when you look at it globally, I did come to some new understandings. Some 70% of greenhouse gas emissions for the United States and California come from fossil fuels, and whereas in undeveloped nations, Brazil and other areas, it comes from the deforestation. 70% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from deforestation, and looking at the economic cycle that continues to lead that to end that deforestation. We have to address poverty in those areas, and hearing from many of the governors of these countries, as well as mayors throughout the world, hearing what they need to do and projects that they'd like to move forward with. Planting trees in these areas is one of those. One of the governors talked about planting 1 billion trees. I don't know if she was lost. It seems a bit much, but it would be wonderful if that could occur with a goal of 5 billion. But looking at other plans, Ontario, Canada has a green belt of 1.8 million acres that they have established, and have decided that they will not approve any new coal burning plants. As well as the governor of Kansas talked about eliminating and refusing to approve new coal burning plants. I guess she had to veto her legislature that wanted to continue, but they couldn't override her veto. So you just see these kind of leadership towards trying to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. Sonora, Mexico has 150,000 acres that they are using to harvest sea algae to use as biofuels. The Wisconsin governor talked about how they're big on cheese, but now they can take the whey from cheese and use it for biofuels. Looking at Sierra Nevada Brewery is using their waste products for using it for their distribution trucks. I know even here at our landfills we're looking at using the methane to run our trash trucks. But just seeing throughout the world what they're doing, Israel has an incredible 72% tax on every new automobile. Unless it's electric, then it's only a 10% tax. So that is pretty extraordinary things. We heard from obviously Governor Schwarzenegger, who called it and talked about how global climate change is the greatest challenge of the 21st century, and referred to how we can create green jobs and that we can actually cut costs and save the environment. They're not exclusive. And President-elect Obama also weighed in through a video where he put out some pretty strong measures of what he wants to see as a nation, and they are exactly those measures that we have here in state law in California. So we see again California leading the way, calling for 20% reduction in emissions by 2020 and 80% by 2050, which is what our state requirements are. And then just finally, Governor Schwarzenegger talking about what's causing our greenhouse gas emissions, the fossil fuels. He referred to fossil fuels as elite fuels, whereas you can get, wind power, water, solar, using things that grow out of the ground, plants from the ground, that those aren't elite, and they are a more equitable way of energizing our world. Also was able to attend, I know Supervisor Bennett was there too, Pacific Clinic's part of the open house that we had last week regarding the Mental Health Services Act. And that was great to see, and we heard from the pastor this morning about giving thanks. To me, that's one of the things we really have to give thanks for, that we have the money to be able to provide the services and really see it helping people with mental problems. So it was nice to go there and nice to see the benefits that our Mental Health Services Act has. And then finally, I would just ask that we close in honor of the people on this list and wish everybody a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Supervisor Bennett.
Thank you. First, I'd like to ask the board to adjourn in memory of the people on this list, and I would call one out, and that's an old friend of Roma Armboost, who we had here in this room, and I'm sure Kathy knows her, Joe Rogers from Ventura, and she very passionate about protecting the quality of life here in Ventura County, very active in many of the women's organizations and stuff, and she'll be missed. Like the board to enjoy memory of the other people on this list also. Appreciate the fact that Supervisor Parks mentioned about the opening and the mental health facility, and it does remind us that some good things come out of opportunities when the citizens step up and say, hey, we're going to identify a revenue source and we're going to use it for something. And in this situation, I think the mentally ill in Ventura County would be a lot worse off if Prop 63 had not passed. I mean, that funding source is just a godsend for them and for our ability to help them, and that's certainly evident there that day. I thought what was really very appropriate was, instead of having speeches by elected officials or the administrators or whatever, it was two of the clients that had recovered so well that they stood up and spoke, and it was much more meaningful to hear from those clients in that situation. The other thing I'd like to do is not just wish my colleagues on the board a great Thanksgiving and everybody else that's out there listening, but let people know that in the city of Ventura, and I'm sure this will be happening across Ventura County, but there's going to be a new kind of celebration on Thanksgiving Day. It's one day, one meal, one city. And the idea is, instead of having some of us come together and serve the homeless a meal, we're instead going to have one big meal, and the homeless are going to be part of that meal. That's going to be from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock at the Knights of Columbus Hall here in Ventura. And everybody is invited to come down and bring your family, bring your kids, and some people, I think, are going to make a double Thanksgiving out of it. They're going to come with their family and do that, and let these people feel connected to the rest of Ventura. And I think it fits with our 10-year plan to end homelessness that we're trying to push out there, which is we need different approaches to the whole homeless. And this is symbolic, but it is a symbolic different approach, saying, let's eat together our Thanksgiving meal rather than we will come down and serve you a Thanksgiving meal there. So again, from 11 to 2, Knights of Columbus Hall, and my hat's off to the people that have organized this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great to be inclusive like that. I think that's a wonderful way of doing that. There's no question about that. I too want to adjourn in memory of the people on this list. And also, as we all get involved, we in Moore Park, there's another graffiti cleanup with more kids. Now we're up to 21 kids, and a couple from the Boy Scouts, 3 different troops. Also, we have a group from the Tang So Do Karate Studios who are getting involved. It's just back again where we have people wanting to take back their community and believing that it's important to do that. And it's great to see those kind of things happening. And then going back to our moment of affirmation today, that was a tremendous opportunity for us to hear the foundations of Thanksgiving and what it's about and why it was done, and the understanding that even in tough times, the blessings that we get are tremendous, and that we have an opportunity at this time of year to say thanks. And I also believe that we have an opportunity as we go into a very difficult holiday season. There's going to be a lot of different things going on. There's going to be toy drives and giving and food drives and everything else, and I would just encourage everyone to do everything you can to participate in part of that, because we have a county that's going to be hurting. There's going to be a lot of people. We saw our unemployment rates up. We've seen a lot of things, and a lot of people live in fear about what's going to go on, and it's just great if we have the opportunity to participate. And, sometimes it's nice to see that during tough times, people do step up, and I just encourage you to do that. So, my comments. Thank you. All right. Why don't we move on to our regular agenda? Got a little bit of time. Get through some of this. All right. The harbor.
Good morning, members of the board. Ms. Robinson, Lynn Krieger from the Harbor Department, and we have 3 items this morning for your consideration.
Lynn, can I just...
Yes.
I'm just glad you're here, and I know you had a scare in the fires up in Santa Barbara, and just,
Yes.
something to be thankful for, huh?
It's something very much to be thankful for. We know 3 people who we consider friends who did lose their homes not too far from us. So I appreciated the thoughtfulness of members of the county who got in touch when we were evacuated and let us know they were thinking about us. That was very thoughtful. Thank you to all of you.
Yeah. Glad things are safe.
Thank you. Yeah, us too. We're going to have a nice Thanksgiving this year. Been a pretty dramatic year this year all the way around, I have to say, between the economy and fires. And the first item we have on the agenda is the contract with Rincon Consultants. This goes back to direction we received from the board at the last study session that we did regarding the landside improvements to the harbor. I did review the letter that you received. I appreciate Mr. Quaintance sharing a copy of the letter in advance. And I should just tell you that the Coastal Commission, at least the staff, and some members of the commission are well aware of this process. It's been going now since the search for consultants started earlier this summer, and I don't believe it's any surprise to them. I would only also comment that on cumulative impacts, we intend to do a very thorough job on that and cover every project that is even in a conceived stage, not anywhere near ready to proceed. So we're asking your approval to this contract, and we will go ahead and get started next week.
Okay. Do we have a motion or a question? Or
Just a question regarding the costs of it. It says it will be, the lessees will bear the portion of the expense attributable to their specific projects.
Right.
And together, that will be 100% of the expenses will be taken care of, or is the harbor department paying for anything?
There is about 2 years ago, I think, I don't have the exact date, there was a cost-sharing letter that went out to split it up among the various lessees. There is a small piece that's left for the harbor department for properties that are currently in the county's hands, and we're bearing the proportionate share of that, but it's relatively small.
What is relatively small?
Susie's here. Do you remember? I believe it's something like 10%. It's not a huge number. 40% I know is borne by Fisherman's
So
Wharf.
about $30,000?
Well, 10% would be, yes, would be under 200, under 20,000.
Under 20,000?
10% would be
Right.
283,000.
Okay, so under 30,000. I'm
28,000.
sorry, I'm looking at the wrong chart here.
Okay. So I'm just,
Yes, that's correct.
okay. And I thought this was 2 projects specifically. One was the wharf area, right?
Right,
And the other one is sort of
right. And in the contract, we have it.
So aren't those just 2 lessees and 2 projects?
Right, and you will see that those 2 projects do add up to the total contract amount, but I'm expecting when they do the cumulative impact, there may be data we have to gather on properties that are in our hands. So these 2 projects currently add up to the $283,000, but I'm not going to stand in front of you and say we will have 0 expense.
I
doubt
would
we'll have 0.
expect 0 expenses just because any developer that does a project pays for an environmental document, and in that environmental document, they have to do cumulative impacts.
Right.
It's not because all these other areas are contributing to the cumulative that they have to contribute to the cost for this developer to do their analysis. So I'm actually a little surprised that anyone other than the 2 lessees would have to pay for their environmental documents. So is this contract already establishing the costs, and they're expecting to have some assistance?
It is a fixed fee contract, and right now it's added up so that the 2 lessees pay the entire total. That's the setup in the contract.
Pay the entire what?
Total of the contract.
Okay, well, that differs a little bit than what we were just talking about, right?
Right.
Where
Yes.
do you see the
All I'm
difference?
saying is if there are
I'm
additional
confused.
expenses, it may not be to this consultant. We may need to have some work done by consultants we already have, just to lay out what the options are on properties we already hold.
Okay, and I guess my emphasis is just that the lessees who have projects are paying for the analysis for their projects, and we're not.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Motion?
Motion to adopt the recommended actions.
And the recommended action is for a contract that's going to be paid fully by the two
Correct.
project people. Second.
I'm sorry that got unclear. I just meant that there may be side expenses. I don't know what this.
There may be some other expenses that may come out of some
Right.
other,
Right.
not supplementing, I mean, not substituting for what the
Correct.
contract, what they're going to pay for their contract.
Correct.
All right. Okay. I think we're clear on that, right? Linda, you clear on that? Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second on this?
I second it.
Okay, second. There we go. Okay.
And I just have to comment, it would have been nice to have received this letter before I sat down. I have not actually had a chance to read it all, and so I don't know exactly what the objections are. But to me, if the lessees want to pay for an environmental document to study the impacts of their project, I can go for that.
That's reasonable.
Well, and that's our practice.
Right. Okay, we can vote then? There we go. Okay, number 28.
Number 28 is a small item. It's with the Fish and Game Wildlife Propagation Fund. And your Fish and Game Commission is recommending a grant to the Sequoia Middle School in the amount of $3,000 for planting native plants around the school grounds. Your commission recommended this, and so we are bringing this forward for your consideration.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Yeah, I see that. We can vote. Can I ask you a question on those?
Yes.
Do they require you to come to the board for this $3,000?
Yes.
It does.
And I just want to compliment this project. It's really great. It involves the teenagers at the middle school, and they are putting native plants, and it's in cooperation with the National Park Service, too, to grow those plants. And it's just a great collaboration, and the students really benefit, and then the whole school benefits from the project, too.
Okay. Oh, did we have a motion? We did. Do we have a second? We did? It's not showing up on my... What's that? We're going to vote? Okay. We did. No, we're on 28 now. We just...
The 28
28.
voting screens in front of us.
Just voted it now.
Go ahead and vote again.
It did, okay.
So,
All right, so we'll go to 29. Technology at its best.
I couldn't figure out where you were either, so. Yeah. Okay. Item 29. This is the, you have seen these before, a resolution to acknowledge, receive, accept, and agree to the California Coastal Commission modifications. This is for what is known as the Waterside Amendment, Amendment number 3. The Coastal Commission took action on October 16th. And what this was is they adopted the revised findings, the revisions they made at the hearing in February, at their February hearing in Oceanside when they approved the Waterside Amendment. The revised findings hearing is relatively straightforward. They're just looking at it and saying, does this reflect what we said at the hearing based on the transcript? They agreed that it did. Now the second to the last step is for the board to say, yes, we agree to the conditions and modifications that the commission has imposed. And we're bringing that to you today. My understanding is that then this Waterside Amendment, pending your approval today, would be certified next week.
Okay. Comments, questions?
Just a comment. This was so convoluted. I just was frustrated listening to it. The fact that, well, the fact that they put a condition in here that is more prohibitive than any we have seen elsewhere in the state regarding the noise condition.
Yeah.
That's just frustrating. And I think there's frustration with the Coastal Commission staff in trying to understand what the policy leaders are really intending to do, not just in our harbor but others too. And that's there just needs to be some consistency in application. Just a personal comment. Obviously, I'll support this because...
my question after being down there at the hearing, and that it was, oftentimes with these deliberative bodies, everybody kind of gets a piece of it. It's a little bit like, this policy is a little bit like that, a committee designed this. It's not what anybody on the commission necessarily wanted, but by the time they all said something and it set it up. But at the time we had concerns, but right now, if we accept the conditions that have been worked out here, work will be able to progress. Contractors will be able to do their work. They'll be able to drive the pilings that they have to drive, and all of that kind of stuff. Right. Okay. Right.
There will be some additional expense, but not, the lessees who are affected by it think not as much expense as waiting and going through the process to amend it again.
Right.
Although the commission has expressed a willingness for us to come back on this issue as they're getting more.
Yeah, and afterwards, talking with staff and commissioners, I think they wanted something reasonable, and so I think there is a long-term willingness to have something reasonable. But I just wanted to check that you're recommending this and that we're not frozen in terms of being able to do anything in the harbor. Great. So, thank you. Somebody made the motion?
I don't know, my
No, they
machine
haven't.
looks like,
No, you need to make the motion.
okay, we're there verbally?
I have voting in progress on my screen.
We're going to go verbally
You
now.
want to take a look
Go
at
ahead
this?
and say
Do we have a motion then? You making a motion?
move the recommended action.
Second.
It's still, the screen didn't change.
He speaks in
I move the recommended action.
Okay, now try doing your vote.
Okay.
Says I
Try to
already
do a vote? I'm still having a problem with,
Okay, hold on.
You get mean with that screen.
I know you do. Well, now it went back to the,
Okay.
now what does it say?
See?
Now let's just do the motion.
Did you second, Kathy? Did you put
Yeah.
that in there? Okay, mine's not showing any
Are we
second.
supposed to push it again?
No,
No.
Has it?
mine's been showing the right stuff. Anyway, the motion carried unanimous. Let's try the next vote.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. We know where the
Thank you.
control is. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah. All right, let's move on to our healthcare agency.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board, Ms. Robinson, Paul Lorenz with the Healthcare Agency. This is a request to ratify and approve a number of increases for vendors serving both Santa Paula and VCMC. The recommended adjustments are included in our budget for this year. Just a comment, these increases are a result of utilization of one vendor in particular over another vendor, as well as increased service levels at both hospitals. Again, the adjustments are included in our budget.
Right. We have a motion.
Move the recommend.
One of the things that I had asked, I called Mr. Powers yesterday, and one of the things I wanted to make sure of, that we were in agreement that they were going to try to keep the control of what we're doing. And we know we're going to probably get, because where the economy is, additional services. Are we going to get paid? The rest of the departments could be saving so much money, and then we keep moving it to the hospital. We know we've got some issues that we have to deal with, but I appreciate you guys really working hard to manage that so we can maintain a good balance.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Okay, are we working now? There we go, it worked. Thank you, sir. And then we're going to move on to our county executive office. Oh, there she comes.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board, Ms. Robinson, Kelly Shirk from County Executive Office, Human Resources. Today before you is a request to establish a new classification of manager, heavy equipment, and fleet services. We conducted a study, as we have been on ongoing mission to create an appropriate classification and compensation plan for the county. And this position at fire was studied, and after the completion of the study, recommended to establish this new classification. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Does anybody have any questions on this? No? Okay. Move that action. Second it. And then we can start to vote. Supervisor Bennett is not sitting here at this moment. Okay? There we go. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Probation. Hello, how are you? Very good, thank you.
Good morning. Supervisor Foy, board members, Mrs. Robinson, Karen Staples with probation, and this morning I'm here to ask that you authorize the establishment of one full-time fixed-term deputy probation officer position and a half-time fixed-term psychiatric social worker position for our recovery classroom. And as you read in the board letter, we received some SAMHSA money from Congresswoman Capps. And what we've done is we've set up a recovery classroom out at Gateway. And the idea is that we are taking kids who have not made it in our drug court program and who really are our deep-end kids who are really into substance abuse and are not going to school, obviously, and are in and out of our juvenile facilities. And what we've done is we've set up a special classroom out there at Gateway, and we have about 21 kids in the program right now. And as you saw in the board letter, they're clean, they're sober, they're attending school, they have an 85 to 90% attendance rate, and they're all making it in the community. A couple of them have stumbled, but as we all know, stumbling is part of the recovery process. So this morning I'm asking you that you establish those positions so we can continue that classroom.
Okay. Any questions on this? Emma? Yeah. I agree. I think that sounds like you're doing very well, and
It's a wonderful program, and it's
That's
keeping
great.
kids out of custody, and they're clean, they're sober, so,
that is great.
yeah.
We need to hang on 1 second because we need a 4/5 vote.
Yes.
So, but people do stumble. I'm glad to see that you're willing to pick them back up and keep them going.
Part of the recovery process, you know, they
Okay.
make mistakes and they get back on board, and these kids are doing extremely well out there, and you know, as you said, I'll talk a few minutes while, you know,
Yeah.
Supervisor Bennett gives me an opportunity just to talk about the program. We've also connected with ROP, and the kids are in welding programs and computers and auto paint, dentist, floral kinds of things, and you know, they're not only getting their education, but they're picking up some skills so that they will have a trade when they're done with school. And as you probably can guess, these kids are really very credit deficit. So they're picking up some credits. We have most of the kids are in their regular schools, so they'll get a high school diploma. We have a couple of kids we're going to start into a GED program because they're so old and so far in school that they really aren't going to make it if they don't get into a GED program. But again, you know, they're getting their education, they're getting some job skills, and it really, really seems to be working very well, and we're keeping them out of custody. You know, these are the kids who'd be in and out of our juvenile hall. These are the kids who'd be doing, 6 months stay in our treatment program, and we're keeping them out in the community and providing them the support that they need, and as well as their families to be successful.
Can you give him a quick overview? He
Sure.
knows what he's voting on?
Speaker was on back.
Okay, you're okay? I'm waiting for you to vote.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Mary Travers with the Arts has a program, I believe, that was there, and we actually had some young students come and speak, do poetry.
Oh, terrific.
Right, and so I was wondering, is this part of that same program, you know?
You know, I'm not sure,
Because I know they were looking for like another $20,000 to continue that program.
There's something else.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It is not.
I think
It's a
that might
separate
be
one.
part of the hour.
How did we do there? Everybody, let's vote. There you go. Thank you for the explanation, and it's good to see that some of those other programs, people can use their hands, use other skills, and
Absolutely.
that's wonderful. Yes, that's very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Mr. Pratt.
Good morning, Chair Ford, board members, Ms. Robinson. For the record, my name is Jeff Pratt with the Public Works Department. Today, on this item, I'm joined by Lynn Krieger of the Harbor Department. We're here for the purpose of presenting to your board consideration of a resolution amendment on a previously approved Public Works permit. By way of background, your board may recall that in July, you approved a Public Works permit for the reconstruction of the lifeguard tower and restroom at Silver Strand Beach. Your board's approval established a Coastal Commission appeal period on this project. During the appeal period, the Coastal Commission decision was appealed as detailed in your board letter. At a Coastal Commission hearing on the appeal, The commission suggested a conditional approval of this project. The condition was that your board approve an amendment to the project that waived its right to a seawall at any point in the future. Note that a seawall was not proposed as a part of this project. Staff feels that the facility is designed to withstand expected wave run-up and that the waiver will not affect the viability of the project. Staff therefore requests your board approve the recommendations as discussed in your board letter, waiving its right to a future seawall. That concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do you have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I think this is the first presentation that I've heard from Public Works on a harbor project. Is it because the Public Works Department will be overseeing the project?
No, it's not. It's because of the Public Works permit process, part of the local coastal plan. I've only done this once before, and when we're in a coastal zone, there are processes that we can use that make the permitting process. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, this is not part of the Harbor Public Works Plan. This is part of the county's local coastal plan, so the permitting process is completely different and calls for a Public Works permit. That's the difference.
A Public Works permit from our Public Works agency?
And planning, right, because it's a county, it's not a harbor facility. It's a general county facility.
And it is a county project, obviously. And I just comment that I had expressed in the past that I like the idea of having our projects go through our resource management agency, go through our planning department, because to me they are experts at putting projects through and analyzing them, and also I encourage the coordination with the departments. I appreciate you being here, and I'll support. Is there a motion?
Well, we have one speaker.
Oh, okay.
Graham Gilbert.
Morning, Chairman Foy,
Thank
members of the board, Chief Executive. I want to make sure that you understand the implications of the waiver you're being asked to sign. I'm sure you remember the tower that was previously there was destroyed by the ocean. If you sign this waiver, what it means that is that you will never, ever be able to build any structure, any device whatsoever to protect this building from the ocean. This leaves the tower, a public asset costing over $1 million, exposed and in harm's way. With climatic change, global warming, the threat to the building will become more severe as time goes on. By signing the waiver, you'll be exposing the county to an unacceptable risk of loss of asset without the option to protect it. Mr. Pratt just stated that this conditional approval was given by the Coastal Commission. This is actually not true. The board letter states that if you sign this waiver, that the Coastal Commission will likely approve this project. This is not true. The Coastal Commission has other issues with the structure, as stated by Commissioner 1 in an email to Ms. Krieger on October the 9th, 2008. She refuted Ms. Krieger's assertion that approval would be given if this waiver was signed. The issues that the Coastal Commission are concerned about, other than this waiver that is required, is that the building is in the 100-year flood zone. This building cannot be built in this site. This is a significant issue as far as the Coastal Commission is concerned. The other issues include the public view issues, the effects of the building on denying to the public, particularly the handicapped and the elderly, the right to go there and actually look at the ocean. This building will actually block that view, and this is a significant issue. There are other issues that concern this project, and I plan to pursue these with Coastal Commission as time goes on. There are too many to be mentioned here. In the event of the destruction of this building by the ocean, of course, no state funds will be available as this waiver, if you sign this waiver. No state funds will be available to you for remediation. Lastly, what I'd like to say is that I'd like to ask you how you can commit more than $1 million to a building where the resources, as you've mentioned in many times today, are very, very scarce. Particularly in this current economic climate, I cannot see how you can commit this kind of money to a project that is actually not needed. It's actually something, the facilities that would be provided by this building can be provided in a much less expensive way. I cannot see how you can commit this money to this kind of project. I would like you not to sign this waiver. I would like you to not do this. If you do sign the waiver, of course, it will go back to Coastal Commission and the matter will be pursued there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Any comments after that? No? Okay. Anybody comments, questions here? Okay. We'll go back to our, make a motion.
Move the recommended action.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll make the second. We can vote. All right. Thank you. Move on to our Sheriff's Department.
What was that?
Four. Yeah,
Good morning, Chairman Foy, members of the board, CEO Robbins. I'm Jeff Madsen, Technical Service Commander for the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department is recommending for the board's consideration the addition of a fixed-term position and establishment appropriations of unanticipated revenue for a grant award from the National Institute of Justice for the 2008-2009 Forensics DNA Backlog Reduction Program, and I'm here to answer any questions.
If I just add, so we want to add a new position to do this. We don't have people already doing this?
We have 6 DNA scientists currently. The DNA backlog is what we always worry about. So when we get these grants, we try and hire fixed-term forensic science positions to assist those 6 DNA scientists. Our DNA amount of DNA that's coming into the lab has increased by about 200% from last year alone. So it's a portion of the lab that's expanding greatly.
I see. Okay. All right.
I'd be happy to make the motion, and from what I've seen in the paper, a lot of counties have incredibly big backlogs, and it was nice to see Ventura County isn't one of those. But it shows that we are looking at continually every chance we get for grant dollars to work on that, because it is essential. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Foy,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a correction to the salary range that's reflected on the board letter. The range is currently showing at $48,872.03 to $68,372.69. The correct range would be $49,116.39 to $68,714.56.
You agree with that?
I wouldn't argue with her.
Thank you.
You're a smart man. Okay. Okay, then we need to vote? Or I need to vote? Excuse me. Okay. Sir?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Ms. Robinson. Before you is a request for approval to accept the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration grant called SAMHSA, and authorize the sheriff to accept the grant, adjust revenue for the funding of the Ventura County Law Enforcement Crisis Intervention Team. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you might have regarding this grant. I would tell you that because we've had a little bit of difficulty filling one of the positions of the 2 positions in the CIT program, the distribution of that $191,000 will actually cover the full cost for the 10 cities and the county for the remainder of this fiscal year. So in the letter we stated it would be a portion of that, but because we haven't been able to fill that position as yet, it will actually cover the whole cost. Additionally, we'll also be expanding the program to a 3rd course in the latter part of the fiscal year. So.
Okay. And nothing's changed in our policy of tracking all the grants, and when the grants go away, the positions go away. Right. Absolutely.
Do you see any problem in, since we're taking all of the 100% and the cities are going to be relieved of this year, is when we have to go back to sharing the costs of, a
No,
problem?
I actually brought that up at BCLEC with the heads of the cities, and they understand that dynamic, and most of those cities are in 2-year budget processes anyway, and the money's already been committed. Obviously, if that is a problem for any one of the 10 cities, then we'll have to come back before the board and address those issues, and we certainly will do that.
You got that in writing from them? You got that in writing? So we can say, it seems that people make comments later, don't they?
I guarantee you we will do that.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Correspondence would be a good one to do. You got a comment in there?
I just, my only comment is, there's one item, item 37 on the correspondence agenda. I believe you all received, as well as the clerk, a copy of a note from Kelly that talks about veterans' benefits and how they apply. It would have been this morning that we sent that out, so just for your information.
Okay. So, give me a second, I'll second. Okay. All right. Very quick. The efficiency of this board is unbelievable. It must be down there with those people down there.
He thought it was due to the chair last week.
Jeez. Here we go.
Competition is setting the bar.
It's time, man. Just make it happen. All right. Do we have a little time to go into closed session? You got that, or you have anything you can do? Is anybody here that you need? Let's do it. We'll be effective and efficient. I will come back to order. We have number 17, our public hearing, Community Development Block Grant Funds. Continue, member.
Good morning, Chairman Foy, members of the board, Ms. Robinson. My name is Christy Madden with the County Executive Office, and I'll try not to break out into a coughing fit during my presentation. Try and get through this. The purpose of today's hearing is twofold. First is to consider reprogramming of some CDBG money to 2 new projects to serve the youth in the community of Piru. And the second are to consider comments on our amended consolidated annual plan and our citizen participation plan. Is there a thing that I used to forward? Show me, Roberta. Oh, look at that. Earlier this year, our office was notified that the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Clara Valley had closed their Piru operations with the intent of consolidating that program with the new Rancho Sesqui program that they had started earlier in the year. Staff had indicated to the Boys and Girls Club that with the community's support, we would be willing to revise their CDBG contract to allow them to move their programs to the Rancho Sesqui location. Unfortunately, when the Boys and Girls Club approached the Piru community, they were not in support of moving the program out of the community of Piru. So we subsequently canceled the Boys and Girls Club contract, leaving us with some CDBG money to be reprogrammed. In fact, the community of Piru is really devoid of any programs to serve the Piru community. And thanks to the Ventura County Deputy Sheriff's Association, we've accumulated this nice list of what's not in Piru. Now, on our next slide, we know who is in Piru. We have 400 children, 20 child preschool kids, 7 parolees, 6 registered sex offenders, 21 gang members, 40 felony search term probationers, and perhaps Mr. Hagel can explain to us what that is, and 14 taggers. So as you can see, we have a significant influence on the children of Piru, and it's not all in a positive way. So the Deputy Sheriff's Association, hearing of this plight, recognized the potential adverse influences on the community of Piru, and they started working with the local community to fill the void. With that, they developed a multi-pronged approach that's designed to reach out to all age groups in Piru, and at present they're looking at 3 primary programs. One would be to provide services to the preschoolers through Full Circle Learning, which is the only preschool facility in the community of Piru, and they have a need for some equipment for their operations. They would like to provide scholarships to the area's 5th graders. Many of you with children may know that it is common for 5th graders to go to outdoor school for a week, and it is difficult, if not impossible, for many of the children in Piru to take advantage of this program because there is a cost associated with that. So what the Deputy Sheriff's Association would like to do would be to provide some scholarships for some of the 5th graders to participate. And finally, they want to provide a program to provide outreach to the teens in the community and provide chaperone field trips to a variety of facilities, including Channel Islands CSUCI University, to give the Piru kids some exposure to that and some arts programs perhaps in the LA area. In addition to the public service program, we do have some unprogrammed non-public service money that we use for infrastructure development. So the redevelopment agency has proposed constructing a skateboard park in the community of Piru. And ironically, when Monica was out at a Piru Neighborhood Council meeting that very night, unbeknownst to her, a whole group of children had come with a petition that they had filled out saying, we, the kids of Piru, really need a place for us to have activities for the community. So the skateboard park is a perfect option. The location that they're looking at setting up the skateboard park is along the rail corridor. You might recall it was a site that we had contemplated putting the fire station some time ago. This particular location has the advantage of being visible to the community, readily accessible, and in close proximity to the bike path through the community. Now, the development of a skateboard park is not only supported by the community, but is recognized by our Parks Department as a low-maintenance option that would be available to all age groups. In addition to these proposals, your board is being asked to approve the recently amended Citizen Participation Plan, largely administrative modifications that were made to that plan following a monitoring that we underwent earlier this year. We have amended our annual plan to include these 2 new programs, and I'd like to take this time to acknowledge the contribution of Tim Hagel with Ventura County Sheriff's Department and the Deputy Sheriff's Association, who was instrumental in working with the community to come up with this proposal, and thanks to the Redevelopment Agency for their vision for the skateboard park. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Christy, Piru qualifies as an area of benefit?
Yes, it does.
I just wanted to point that out because that's why some things can be done with CDBG funds in Piru that you may not be able to use community development block grant funds in other places to do similar sorts of things, and it's because of the poverty level within the Piru community meets the HUD requirements for community, what is called area of benefit. So it qualifies that group to receive a wider variety of assistance.
And we do, I think, have some of the youth in the audience today who may have turned in speaker cards.
Yes, we have 2 speakers. Why don't we listen to those 2 speakers? We have Mercedes and Samuel.
Hi, my name is Mercedes, and I'm a senior at Fillmore High School, and I've lived in Piru for my entire life. And I just wanted to say that there's no activities in Piru at all whatsoever. There's nothing to do. And any activities that we do have or are available to us are in Fillmore, which is 10 minutes away. And it might seem that it's just 10 minutes away, so why not go over there? But in Piru, it takes an hour to get to Fillmore. And because of the bus system, because for Piru, we have the worst public bus system ever. I swear. It's just horrible, okay? Because sometimes they'll forget to pick you up if they don't like you. They've done that to me. Like if you call and complain and say you're late.
You look like a likable person.
Thank you. But no, they'll forget you, or they'll just be like, oh, there wasn't enough people, and so it's just bad. And even though, like, okay, you can get there, say that your game or whatever activity you want to do starts at 6 o'clock. That's fine, but it lasts 2 hours. The last bus back to Piru is at 7, so you can't do it. And there's no, if you are called for the 7 o'clock, they want you ready by 6:45. They don't pick you up until 7:10, but you have to be waiting for them, or else they'll leave. And then you're stranded in Fillmore. Yeah. And also, people have, most of the children, like the teenagers, they've decided to hitchhike to go back to Piru, and that's not very safe, according to, all those people who are bad. And a lot of the activities also, they cost money. The bus costs money. Even if we had a good public system, we don't have the money to pay for it. And our community is pretty much poor, like really, as Ms. Robinson said. And so we just need some stuff to walk to and to be able to get to.
Thank you.
My name is Sam Cruz. I'm a junior at Fillmore High School, and I've lived in Piru for 7 years. My favorite sport is soccer, and Piru has a favorite sport. It's tagging. My view on Piru is tagging everywhere, because when I go running by the railroad tracks, by the bridge, there's tagging everywhere. You can't go a day without seeing tagging in Piru. And like Mercedes said, there is no classes, but like learning how to tag, that's our class. And we need to get activities and classes and field trips in Piru, because when I was in the Boys and Girls Club, we did some stuff, but then it just disappeared, and the next place is Fillmore. And I hope you can support Captain Hagel so we can make Piru a better town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair? Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak to us, to our young people. Mercedes, I appreciate that you took the time to come in here. And Lynn, thank you so much for bringing them. I know you did. Thank you so much. I just have one question, and I hate to ask questions I don't know the answer to, but I'm going to risk this one since I see Paul and Ron sitting there. The skateboard park. There is for the board's information, there is a park commission that has appointees from the community that serve in Piru. And so this skateboard park will come under the Parks Authority and maintenance and all of that. I'm assuming that I know the answer to that.
See, you're fooling us.
Actually, we just had this discussion yesterday on the transition of the skateboard park. Yes, the short answer is the commission would, as they do with any of the other recreation facilities in there, have their input, because the skateboard park would be a rec facility. And ultimately should fall under the Parks Department. This is a discussion we had yesterday. Where's the funding going to come for the additional maintenance costs for that? And we talked about this yesterday with Monica and Christy. So ultimately, that's what will happen. Initially, we got a few years before it would be constructed, and would be involved in helping with the construction process and what the minimum requirements would be. My staff has already been talking to them about parking in the area, restroom facilities, where those would be closely located. So it's more than just a skateboard park. There's other pieces to that component.
Okay. Thank you. That answers that.
So, I guess, Christy, from what I'm looking at here, we're talking about $66,000. Is that what it is total? And with that 66, this is just a start. We can't construct a skateboard park for $66,000.
Correct. There's $57,000 in change that's going for the skateboard park architecture and engineering costs. The subsequent costs for construction of the park will come from a tax increment and other grant funds that would be pursued that may or may not include CDBG money in a future cycle.
Tax increment relates to the redevelopment area where it already gets, so it's not an additional tax, it is what the revenue source is for the redevelopment agency.
Collected from within the redevelopment area.
Okay. So we have the land you talked about by the old, where the fire station was going to go? We already have
Correct.
property to
Yes.
do this
Yes,
and
we
everything
already
else.
have control of the land.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate this project and I support the project. I have just some thoughts about the skateboard park. Having 3 times now in my political career been involved in skateboard parks and stuff. This is for design, and so I'm guessing somebody's going to design something that once it's designed is going to lock in the cost because it's going to lock in the project. And if you lock that in before you know what money you have, here's this pattern that I've seen over and over again. It's we only have this amount of money. Let's design a smaller park so that we can get something, or on the other hand, I mean, the fights almost always that I've seen have been over ultimately what gets designed, and it's a combination of cost and it's a combination of what people want. What I see here is the possibility that you're going to go to design without having sort of the discipline of the cost side at the table with that. And you might say, and this is what usually happens, is we can raise $350,000, we can raise $450,000, and then it doesn't happen. And you've designed a $450,000 skateboard park, and you could actually have a pretty nice skateboard park for $200,000, and that's where you are. But you designed a $450,000 one, and now you got to spend more money to design a $200,000 one. So I only offer that as a piece of advice as you're moving forward. I support it, but that piece in this was the one concern that I had that I wanted to pass on, and I'm sure you guys are clever enough to figure that all out.
I do know that there have been discussions, and even the community itself recognizes that they really want to construct a relatively modest skateboard park. They really don't want anything that's going to draw people from throughout the county. They really are looking for a community-driven type facility. If you have anything to add. True?
Yeah,
You can come up, Tim. Hold on right here.
From a law enforcement side, obviously, sometimes skate parks also have issues. It is a congregating point, and so it's kind of interesting to deal with the kids in town. And talking to Sam, Mercedes, and many of the kids in town, Fillmore's building a giant skate park with big bowls and pools and all that kind of stuff. But again, it's the isolation of Piru. So they're interested in exactly what you're talking about. Simple. Keep it really simple. That the words I'm hearing from the kids is like 4 elements of really basic, no bowls, none of the big fancy stuff, just basic stuff, if not items that could actually even be bolted into the all above ground, so that if time changes 10 years from now and skateboarding's not the rage, they can convert it to a basketball court or any other kind of tennis court or whatever. So it's exactly what you're talking about. $200,000, I don't think that's in any of their minds for something that large even there.
Great. Let me ask you, you made a point that I was concerned with. When you put one of these together, you draw a lot of people to it. How do you control that? We saw a couple things on the screen there that has a lot of people that you may not want in something like that around the kids.
And that's the two-edged sword there. The bottom line is they're already skating in town, and there's skating in other areas and in portions of the town. I personally, as the patrol captain there, I'd rather actually have them right there. It's a great location. They're going to be drawn to that spot instead of me sending them behind bowls in the creek down in dark, dreary washes up by the school. They're going to be drawn there. So it actually benefits us for the law enforcement side to get them to one spot. However, the caveat that is graffiti-proof elements. When you start getting into those big bowls and those kind of things, when it comes to the design element, that's a huge component of it, is what's going to be visible from Main Street right there as people are coming into town. Keeping these elements so that if you do get the graffiti there, you're shielding it till we can get to it to repair it, but yet also that we have safety so that we can see what's going on. Right. You couldn't have picked a better location, and you could have spent $67,000 or $57,000 doing a site survey around Piru, and you found the spot. That piece of property right there is wide open. It's the most heavily patrolled by law enforcement, so we're blessed with that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very visible location. The whole community can see it and are active around it. And I would presume that, frankly, as close-knit as the community is, they happen to know who's who on the list of who not to know.
Absolutely.
Great.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Not to micromanage, but having gone to my fair share with my 4 kids, it might be nice if something could be arranged that you'd have the younger children have their own special hour or something, because the big kids will just overwhelm them. So just a thought there. But it sounds like a great project, and also it's nice to see the Sheriff Deputy Association stepping up.
I have to tell you, before you make the motion, I think you're going to. In 1993, I got elected to the Ventura City Council, and we were debating spending money on the skate park. And there must have been 10 or 15 people in the audience saying, "This is just a fad. It's going to be gone." And I think of Supervisor Parks talking about her kids when they were young, and her kids are all in college now. So this is not a fad. It's not going away.
It's here to stay.
Well, and I would ask that the Parks Commission work with the teams and work with how we're going to yes, in the design components of this, but also in rules. And I think that in communities there have been cases where the kids adopt this park and they respect it, and you don't have the tagging issues, and it really becomes a part of the community that that is appreciated and then respected that way. So that, we look at doing that where we get buy-in from the teens who want this and who are going to help us to establish that kind of respect for the facility. So, and the
I
monitoring.
think that's a great point,
Yeah.
Supervisor Long. There are certain areas in Piru, as Sam described, tagging is the #1 sport, but there are certain areas that are off limits because of community buy-in, that no one crosses the line.
Right.
And there are locations in town there, and I think that you can create, we'll probably see increased calls for service at this location, but it's just shifting them from decreased calls for service down by the church or up by the school. So it'll be a shift of calls for service.
Great. Well, good.
I'd like to thank Captain Hagel. He's done an outstanding job in Piru, I think, and I know, just hearing from the residents there, that they feel there is visibility and engagement and true community policing going on. But to be able to step forward in this small pot of money, but yet looking at doing some very creative things with it to benefit this community. And there's no questions, the statistics we've seen up there are true with Piru. And many times we'll take a couple steps forward and have to take a step back because of a variety of things that are always challenging in Piru. The Boys and Girls Club, as all the board members know, they're all struggling right now. And with Santa Clara Valley Club that covers Fillmore, Santa Paula, and did cover Piru, and they're still in the CESB community. It's real tough. That Boys and Girls Club's struggling mightily. So this isn't an opportunity where the community has stepped in and said, we know we have these deficits, and with cooperation and leadership by a small but mighty group to bring this forward, I think is outstanding. An opportunity to reprogram and reuse these funds and what will be very positive steps for the community of Piru. And I wanted to let Mercedes know that we're working on that bus issue. We know that's Piru too is a community that could, for a variety of reasons, for workforce, for students, to improve that bus service. So the Transportation Commission we are working on that to see what we can do to improve that. And this board sits as the mayor or city council, whatever hat you want to put on for the Piru community. It's our unincorporated community that is changing. There's some new homes, and we need to get people more engaged from those new homes so that they really can appreciate the history of Piru and value that community. And I think when we bring these types of programs and services in, they'll have an opportunity to get more engaged. I don't know that to a point that we're going to see Lions clubs and these others grow up in Piru someday, maybe. But for now, we are it. And so I would appreciate the board's support in supporting this motion, and thank Christy and Monica and Captain Hagel and everyone for stepping forward with this creative reprogramming use of funds. It's a motion to support.
Second.
Okay. Thank you very much. Enjoy. Okay, we'll go to number 18.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Marty, Ms. Robinson, Kelly Shirk with County Executive Office. Today before you is the second reading of a request to place for an ordinance to place the APCD Deputy Air Pollution Control Officer in the unclassified service. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? No, we have a motion. Second. Okay. You gonna vote? Did you? Yeah. There you go. Are we there? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Gentlemen, you've got some good news for us.
Good morning, Mr. Foy and members of the board and Mrs. Robinson. I'm pleased to report our report on the Treasury investment performance for the month of October. summarizing, saying 3.54%, which looks amazingly good right now, and which translates into about $4.5 million of additional revenue available for local government. Our CIO has a couple of words he wanted to share with you about interest rates. If there's questions of me, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll turn the podium over to Mr. Hanson.
Any questions? No. I think Mr. Hanson said in our last meeting, I saw up there just the other day, that Citibank's too big to fail. I guess you were right, huh?
They are, and they're in very good shape now. The government continues to throw money at all of these companies that are qualified in banks in an effort to stabilize the economy and to stimulate the loaning of money, which is the key. I was just going to say, as a word of into the future, I'm very happy with this rate right now at 3.5, but I have to tell you that I'll be receiving probably about $500 million at this point in tax money, and interest rates are very, very low. They're in the 1% handle. I invested earlier this week at 0.5%. So the good news is we're getting the money. The bad news is that interest rates are going to, at these rates, dilute the yield of the portfolio. To give you one prime example, Treasury bills this week for a 90-day Treasury bill were at a negative 0.10, which meant that you actually pay the government interest to buy the Treasury note. And the quick answer...
And the government can use every penny you want to give them.
And everyone says, how is that possible? I'll give you the really quick answer. If you're China and you're importing to the United States, you're getting billions and billions in US dollars. Where do you put that money? You don't want to put it in a bank. You don't want to put it in a corporation. So the one flight to quality is a 90-day T-bill. It's the most liquid instrument, and theoretically it's the highest rated. But now it's gone to the point where they have to pay a negative return, so that's a negative 0.1% to own those bills. But to them, it's a really safe harbor, and they don't have to worry about their money. But in the rates that I'm investing in, it could be anywhere from 0.5% to 1.5%. So that's just sort of an update. But we should keep a pretty good yield for the next few months because, as you know, my style is to have sort of a barbell where I have short-term, highly liquid, $500-600 million that I could make available in 3 hours. And then on the long end, I average it with higher yields, and that should help over the next few months. But these might be the high rates that we'll see the next couple months. Any questions? Other than that, happy Thanksgiving.
Just have one. We talked a little bit about sort of our concentration in private companies last time.
Mm-hmm.
Toyota, General Motors, and you gave your explanations for that. We have significant concentrations in the home loan bank and the farm credit. And so I just note that, and all things being equal, if we can diversify and find other equal government agencies to those agencies so we're not so concentrated in them, I think that would make sense. My question, I assume that there are not, and that's why we're concentrated in these two, but still there's a significant concentration in those two specific.
Right, and that is because when I was laddering out, we didn't have that explicit guarantee that Paulson gave to Freddie Mac, which is Mortgage Corp, and Fannie Mae. So I was buying home loans and farm credit. They're both, just for an information purposes, they're both federally enacted agencies by Congress. They are both AAA rated. The Federal Intermediate Farm Credit is more agriculture loans to farmers and stockmen. They've never had any question with their debt. Everything is fine. Home loan had a problem. They straightened it out. And when they adjusted Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they turned to home loan and said, we'll also open up the window, which means you can borrow money anytime you want, up to $1 billion. So eventually, I would love to, level off and balance the tank. But that's the reason we got so heavy, because I just was waiting for that explicit guarantee which came out in the Senate banking testimony.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the information.
All things concerned, I would love to balance the tanks.
Okay. Do we have a motion to receive and file?
Second.
Okay. We are a little past time. We'll move to item number 20. Good to see you again.
Good morning.
We keeping you busy?
Hello, good morning, Chair Foy, honorable board members, and Mrs. Robinson. I'm Linda Lee with the County Executive Office. Excuse me for my voice, I'm about to lose it. The item before you is a report examining on the Harbor Commission. By way of background, on April 8th, your board identified a total of 18 commissions for further examinations. In your packet, Exhibit 1 identified these 18 commissions. So today's item is on the Harbor Commission. Briefly, the commission is a discretionary advisory board with 10 members. All of these members are volunteers without compensations. The commission is subject to the provisions of the Brown Act. The commission convenes 6 meetings and 1 special meeting per year. The Harbor Department provides staff support, and in fiscal year 07, the commission convened a total of 7 meetings. Total cost was approximately $56,000, inclusive of support staff time, staff attendance, and supplies. At its November meeting, the Commission discussed various options regarding the role of the Harbor Commission. In your board letter, we've identified 3 options as discussed. Option 1 is, can the Commission function with a reduced number of commissioners? At the present time, there exists a 10% vacancy rate in the Commission. While this has not presented a challenge in terms of decision-making, as the Commission continues to achieve meeting quorum, reducing the number of commissioners will not reduce the cost of staffing the commission. Option 2, can the commission meet less frequently? The commission convenes 6 meetings and 1 special meeting per year. The commission suggested convening on a quarterly basis instead of 6 meetings. With the proposed reduced number of committee meetings, it is anticipated a significant reduction of $26,000 in the administrative costs. Thus, the total annualized cost in staffing the commission is estimated at $29,000. Additionally, the commission proposed another version of this option would be to retain the current commission but have no regularly scheduled meetings. Instead, the commission would be called into service only on special issues. Option 3 was discussed, but it was not elaborated on the concept. A possibility of having a task force group to provide input to the harbor director to be convened as needed. Although this option was not elaborate on the concept of the proposed task force other than suggesting changing the format from a formal advisory to an informal work group. This option is feasible because currently the department has instituted various public forums to receive community feedback. To implement this task force concept at the recommendation of County Council, this would require the commission to be dissolved. Should this option be selected, it is recommended that your board instruct the harbor director to appoint members to a newly created task force and report to the board on periodically its formations and operation. This option would result in a saving up to $56,000 in administrative costs of staffing to the commission. Regardless, if any of the above options is chosen, the Harbor Commission resolution and/or bylaws will need to be amended or rescinded. And today we have available the harbor director for questions and answer.
We have any questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
I have one for the harbor director. The question I have is whether the cost savings would there be a cost savings, or would your staff just be channeled to other projects, or will we actually see less funds needed? You going to reduce staff or anything? Or?
We are looking at the possibility of reducing staff this year, but not related to this particular project. What would happen is they would just do other work or do work more promptly than we're able to now. I doubt that there would be a reduction in staff just related to this item.
So there really isn't a cost savings?
No, except in the speed that work gets done.
You'll be more efficient, for example, as you see it. Okay.
One of the things that, Lynn, maybe you, because understanding I had a conversation, currently right now, somebody videotapes your
Yes.
meetings, and then also county council is at the meetings?
Correct.
So part of the cost of this is those two pieces, right?
Right.
Whichever.
And that relates back to a time when we did have a complaint filed against a particular commissioner who's not any longer on the commission. But because of that filing of that complaint, we were instructed to have the meetings videotaped and have county council there. There's since been a complaint filed against another commissioner, and so we've continued with that practice, but it does add to the expense. You're right about that.
There is. And then we do that here now versus
Right.
at the harbor, right?
Right. And that was due to travel time and recognizing that some commissioners are from East County, not everybody is close to the harbor.
So it was part of that, not because we also had, I think, our CEO sit in on some of these at one time, right?
Right.
Right, so there was some pretty good expense. Is it less expensive if it moves back to the harbor, so you don't have all your travel time for your own staff to be at these meetings? Or what?
Yeah, probably so, and we don't have room rental. We don't really have a room that we can use at the harbor department if we have to continue videotaping and doing some of that.
But
other record keeping.
Is videotaping required, do you think, now?
I don't know, I'd have to consult with
Hate to put you on the
the
spot. like
CEO
that. It
and
just
county
seems,
council.
I don't know of any of the commissions we have where people are being videotaped.
Right,
It
but
seems-
that was the genesis of that.
Right, right. And then county councils, they're also there too. It's, I don't know if we have any other ones that do that. It's very expensive. Okay.
Question?
Yes.
Besides the board, which holds public hearings on anything and everything that happens in the harbor,
Right.
what other regulatory agencies have a public, open process where the public can speak to issues related to the harbor? Coastal
Well,
Commission?
Coastal Commission for sure. We have issues that have gone to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and they have had 2 public hearings in the last 2 years on issues related to the harbor. And then you have directed lessees to hold, I mean, that's a different kind of form, but the lessees have been instructed to hold those public outreach sessions. I think, it's commented on Linda's letter, and part of that came, I think, from us. I think we've had less public attendance at commission meetings, in part because there are so many other things going on right now, including those lessee meetings. I don't know why else we would have less public, and they come here.
And there have been cases, probably rare, but where City of Oxnard might hold a
Right.
hearing on a particular piece that they have authority over the local coastal plan or...
Correct, and we do public updates there periodically too,
Right.
at the city council meeting.
So the point is there's significant public process around everything that occurs in that harbor.
I would agree with that. We see more people here on the harbor than anything else, right? Yes. Supervisor Bennett, you have any comments at all? Or?
Council to make a decision, but not staff.
Okay. Linda?
And that's where I am too. I have some input that I've reached out to the community, the people I've appointed, the Harbor Commission, as well as the information that, how has the board's decisions been enhanced by the Harbor Commission, and frankly, I'm not seeing a lot of support. There's some frustration by commissioners that it doesn't really matter, and from the community, I'm hearing the same thing, including the people that were here this morning speaking, and just don't see the worth of the commission. And it obviously is another one of those time drains for our staff. If we're not getting something out of it, I can't see why we'd want to continue it.
Okay. Steve?
I have a comment also.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Steve, are you ready? No. Well, I've talked with my commissioners, and I think that they would be either open to the second option or the other, which is to do away with the commission. There has been difficulties getting quorum. They do feel that there's been, with the board's change, I don't know, 2 years ago, whenever we took the change where the harbor is important to all of us, so harbor things come to all of us, that has put additional opportunity both for the public process and engagement, but for the board to be fully engaged in decisions at the harbor. So I think that the same could be said, that it isn't we always value our public members who are willing to serve. That's not the question. It's just it's a challenge to get to have quorum and to I think to feel like there is still a strong need for a harbor commission. I think so. My comment.
The only two proposals I would support is sort of a variation of Proposal 2, which is to have a harbor commission that has somebody from each one of us appointed, just one appointed, that we would have some people who have a good background in the harbor, they've gotten up to speed, et cetera, so they're available if an issue comes up that we want to have a group of people study, and perhaps once or twice a year they get some updates in terms of where the harbor is. That or not have a harbor commission at all. Those would be the only two options that I think make sense. And my rationale is, as Supervisor Parks pointed out, what do we do? Are we getting input back from the Harbor Commission that's helping us, having an impact, et cetera? Instead, we're spending time talking to the CEO about how are we going to film the thing so that the disputes between the Harbor Commissioners are not. I mean, when you're in that kind of mode, you're generating more work, and the whole idea is to have an advisory body give you advice to help you with decisions, not to add more decisions like do we pay for videotaping and filming, and do we all of that. So get that combined with the tremendous increase in public awareness of this. I mean, I've said this before. We spend far more time on the harbor than any other single issue, by far, in terms of the hearings and time and all of that. This is not something that lacks for public exposure here at all. So, if anybody was interested in that other one, I'd entertain it, and if not, I'm fine.
I thought it was also interesting. Not only are the more vocal folks down at the harbor agreeing that they don't really need a harbor commission, but then we also heard from the lessees. We got a letter, didn't we, from the lessees? So I just, and then as far as a board member, we do get everybody here, and they come and they comment, so I take their comments and staff's comments, and I really don't hear that much as a body what the Harbor Commission is saying. But I do very much appreciate my commissioners, and they do contact me, and we can talk about them. But I just, I think I'll still have that resource, particularly the ones that have boats down at the harbor. They're going to definitely give us their input. So I'm actually, supportive of eliminating the commission and sunsetting the commission. That sounds better. Don't know how that
sunset it, Tony, not eliminate it, Alex.
Well, and then maybe you want to elaborate what you're
up against the wall, all you guys.
It is Thanksgiving. Come on.
Okay, well,
I would put a motion forward that we sunset the Harbor Commission in deep appreciation for all the volunteers who have served. It is a non-mandated commission. It has become one that has been costly in staff time and others, but as importantly in that motion to say that we will continue as a board to have full hands-on engagement with decisions to be made at the harbor, continue with that model, and always have open public process through everything we do. That's the motion.
You know, as part of that motion, I just hope that we would, at least the spirit of saying, you know, another demonstration of this is if we have a need, we can easily
can always.
reconstitute and
Absolutely.
have each of us appoint somebody and have
Either an
somebody
ad
study
hoc
something.
committee or whatever, if we have the
Can
need.
we put a time on that, like you can say December 31st, 2008, on that sunset? So there's a time, because
Yeah, that
we don't
probably should be a legal necessity to have a date for sunset, to say December 31st, 2008.
Right.
In that motion to sunset the
The
harbor.
videotape gets shut off.
I'm sorry, what?
The videotape gets shut off.
That's right.
That's right.
Okay, so we have a motion, I think we understand that motion.
I'll second the motion.
And we have a second, let's see if we can get back to this agenda. There we go, we have a motion, we have a second. Okay. And let's see where this goes. All right. And I want to say thank you to all the commissioners who've served for so long and done so much, and we appreciate that. And thank you, Linda, for going through all this.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. Wow. She is, what is she going to do? Him gone, this gone. Wow. We may get a nice gift from her. I know it. That's unbelievable. Okay, so we're at 10:30. We did our 10:30, so I guess we're going into closed session again. We will be back here at 1:30. All right, we'll come back to order with our 1:30 time certain. Item number 25 from our CEO's office.
Could you bring up the slides, please? Today's presentation is the third in a series of study sessions regarding the Todd Road Jail expansion. Could you go back to this? Thank you. I've got the clicker. I'll do it. You may recall that our first study session really reviewed the jail construction options, 1 through 4, and our second study session focused on alternatives to jail sentencing and pre-sentencing. There were numerous questions that arose out of the second study session, and there was a list of questions that has been developed and is circulating. I believe the sheriff has some answers to some of those questions today. But we should be developing a comprehensive list of answers to all of those questions that cross departmental lines. They're not just questions for the sheriff. There are some questions for mental health. There are questions for probation across the board. So we are continuing to do work on that. Today's focus really is on cost implications of a jail expansion. And as you know, public safety has always been a high priority in this county, as represented by, even in 1988, the largest percentage of our budget, at 43%, went to our public safety. In 2008-9, that's up at 54%. So we continue to have a high awareness and appreciation and support for our public safety endeavors. If you add in what has occurred with 172, that was 62% before the last 3 months. But if you add in 172 rather than as direct revenue, because as you know, 172 became direct revenue in terms of replacing general purpose revenue, that's really what the picture looks like today relative to our continued support of public safety. And that's not just the sheriff, that's all of the probation, public defender, district attorney, all of the safety agencies. The jail expansion costs, we're talking about starting this with pointing out that we have no miracles. We have no miracles in terms of resolving the issues that we're going to be presenting today. But we are going to be talking a little bit about the costs associated with option 1 and 2. Option 1 adds 528 beds. The total annual cost, including debt service, is $31.2 million. Option 2 adds 656 beds, and the total operating cost would be $36.9 million. As has been discussed before, it is the needs assessment study that indicates that if, in fact, you build option 1 at the point that it became available, it would be filled to capacity. Option 2 gives you, I think, through 2015 or 17, one of those dates, yeah. We're looking at funding alternatives. So ways of funding this is really by internal decreases.
Those were annual figures, 31 and 36.
Yes. That's through the period of debt service, and then it would go down, because that includes both debt service. That is at 15 years. You may want to, depending on how we put this all together, you could potentially expand that period of time. The ways that we could look at funding that are decreases to operating budgets to generate that additional revenue.
I'm sorry, with the debt service, though, that also comes to an end at some point.
That's what I was pointing out. The debt service would come to, based on what we're talking about here, the debt service would come to an end at 15 years.
Okay.
So the ongoing cost after 15 years.
Just be the 20.
Right.
Okay.
And you may, if we put this together, you may decide you don't want to do a 15-year debt service, which is our general practice. You may want to do a 20-year debt service or something different, which would decrease the annual cost of debt service and the overall cost.
And this, of course, is just the additional cost.
Right, absolutely. This is not the full cost of running the Todd Road Jail. This is just for the additions. So we can do it by funding reductions, or we can do it by alternate sentencing, but I think you heard about some of the obstacles to alternate sentencing, and we don't have all the answers to that. Or you can fund with new revenues. Under reductions in expenditures, we've looked at if you did reductions in all general fund departments, meaning that safety agencies also share in that reduction in order to assist with generating enough revenue to support the addition, or if you decide that you need to exempt the public safety agencies, that's another alternative. Another way of either reduction in expenditures, and it could be a combination of reduction in expenditures that we're going to be covering today, is, or a combination of reduction in expenditures and increase in revenue depending on the service level. But what are non-mandated programs that the sheriff provides that maybe monies could be shifted from that program to, frankly, the addition of the jail, and then funding with new revenues. This is our new 5-year outlook. We talked about it last week. Even with trying to bring ourselves into balance this year with the 172 loss, next year we're $7.5 million out. And that is a result of the fact that we don't anticipate real property growth to be coming in at the level it came in this year. I think is that a 2%, Mr. Dursey? That's what you're projecting? So what you see here is, you see the red line, and that would be funding, which would go all the way to option 2. Funding for option 1 would be the yellow line, and no expansion at all would be the first part of the graph is red and the second part is blue. So that's where we would be over time. And I have to point out, this does not deal with anything else coming down from the state. It does not deal with the concerns that Mr. Dursey has raised regarding potentially increase retirement costs in about 2010. So it doesn't have any of that in there. So we're just trying to look at, okay, right now, what are the implications? But I want you to know that. So we looked at the option 1 jail expansion, so the smallest jail expansion, and we said, well, what are we going to have to reduce? And we would have to reduce across the board, all county departments. This shows with all general fund departments sharing proportionately in the reduction. And you can see we have samples here, but that ranges in the area of 4.5% to 5.6% reductions right now in today's activities. This is what the picture looks like if, in fact, you exempt public safety agencies. And these, of course, are not the only departments that are affected, but we're just giving you examples, so we don't have a big laundry list. But that, of course, ranges from 10.5% to 11.2% reduction in order to generate enough revenue or enough surplus to address expansion. And we wanted to try to bring that into perspective. So what does that mean? And this represents option one, and it represents that non-safety agencies do not participate in the cuts. And as you can see in the assessor's office, that would be basically a net cost cut of just under $900,000 in some 16 positions, which would definitely impact their service level. And if, in fact, you look at this and say, well, what if everybody shared in the cuts? Well, then it's about half that, but you still have safety sharing in the cuts. So this would be the Auditor Controller's Department, which would be a loss of 16 positions and also a significant impact on service levels. Then we wanted to look at some of our, we have leveraged departments. When they lose a little bit of money, a direct net cost, they actually lose quite a bit in matching. So this deals with an example scenario of public health losing $125,000. It would impact the public health nursing program, the immunization program, and the total loss of appropriation would be 2.8. Basically, that 125,000 gets us 2.7 million of other revenue. So that's the kind of issues that we're going to have to struggle with people trying to absorb the cuts. This is Human Services Agency, and it's their impact. Their cut would be $870,000. That would impact the homeless program, elimination of the foster care program, elimination of supplemental. So these are examples of the kinds of things that would occur. We were trying to make it real. Total loss of appropriation, 3.4 million, and that really is another 2.5 from outside. It's leveraging. The 870,000 is leveraging 2.5 million. And you'd lose at least 31 positions. This would just show at the end of all that what would happen in terms of our percentage share. And I think, Mr. Dursey, were you going to talk about this one? Do you need this?
One of our scenarios was to eliminate or use some sheriff department appropriations and reallocate them, sheriff department net costs, and reallocate them what we would consider to be non-mandated sheriff services. The sheriff's department, the current is almost $109 million in net cost, split up between police services and detention services. The next slide, we'll just take that blue piece right there, that $60,941,000, and we split it up into three additional pieces. The admin support, which is about $10 million, the patrol, which we've peeled off at about $28 million, and then what we would consider to be non-mandated regional service. Non-mandated regional service is kind of a generic term. There's a number of items in there, so if you take that yellow pie and we break it down, the yellow rimmed pie, and we break that down into what we call non-mandated regional services. The top one is major crime investigations. There are a number. These numbers are, there's almost $22 million of net cost in these non-mandated, what we would consider to be non-mandated regional services costs. I think the sheriff may argue the fact that whether or not they're mandated, non-mandated, but in general, we have, for example, the aviation unit's about $4 million. We've identified their cost of $4 million. The crime lab forensic unit is about $4 million. The technical service is another $4 million. And then the major crime investigations, which they do some countywide functions as far as bomb squad and major crime looking at rapes and murders and homicides, those types of things. That
Do you mean outside of the unincorporated area?
That's correct. They would contribute that. So the bomb squad, and I don't believe the gang unit is included in this, but I think they're part of the jail function. But those types of functions that they do that actually leverage additional dollars. The total appropriations for these are about $28.9 million. So you see they bring in about $7.2 million of additional other revenue to provide support for these services. And once you start doing some of these services, they all of a sudden become mandated, even though you can cut them off. But in order to get the funding, clearly they would be mandated at that point in time to get that.
Either for you now or for the sheriff later, in terms of the major crimes, do cities reimburse in any way for the sheriff's department's assistance in major crime investigation? That'd be one of the questions that I have. Thank you.
So again, if I might, so these would be services that we provide in cities?
Some of them would be considered, yes. Some of them would be services we provide in the cities. Let me get my little list here that we have for major crime. There's investigations on homicide, arson, sex crimes, fugitive, narcotics, bomb squads, safe asset forfeiture. Some agricultural crimes would probably not be in the cities, but the high-tech task force, the SWAT is a multi-unit SWAT team. So those types of, those, you know, at a certain point in time, you can't necessarily, you know, the sheriff would probably say you can't do without them, but from our, we're trying to give the, you know, the entire picture here that some of these things are not mandated from the pure, you know, have to
You mean
do.
constitutionally mandated?
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
that's correct. So, so we would probably argue with the sheriff that a lot of them are very important. Now, we're not saying that. However, we are saying that they're not mandated. So there's some flexibility within the sheriff's budget. So that's what we're trying to show here, that it's not complete. There is some non-mandated services that we provide out there in the sheriff's department. So I think that's probably look at this as probably the most controversial aspect of this presentation today.
But some of these, there's a cost that we pay to have these. But then if we don't have them, we're going to pay a cost to do it. Like I'm thinking the lab. We have to have lab work done. We pay somebody else to do that work. Is that what we do?
Well, I think the state does not charge at this time for lab work.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, but the idea that you have to wait 6 months to get something back from the state does cost you. I don't think there's any questions that would cost you versus 2 months back from your own lab.
Okay, good idea.
And that's another issue. We do not charge cities for that crime work either, except on limited basis. We do get some reimbursements.
Because there's going to be some counties in the state that don't have some of these services.
That's correct. And there are some counties that will actually charge the local agencies some of these fees.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, in some places, cities pay to
Yes.
for the crime lab, for example.
None of that is accounted for in the contracts that the cities have with the county?
No. These are all in the sheriff police services. If you notice back here, we'll go back to this one. This police services, out of the $60 million, that's the net cost. So the remainder, I think the overall appropriation in police services is in excess of $100 million. So the remainder dollars are coming in, I think about $45 million in that range. Don't quote me on this, but there's a number of dollars coming in from the contract cities that offset this net cost. So this is just the leftover, the county's general fund contribution to these programs. And then this chart is just to show you our commitment under the Public Safety Ordinance 4088. And right now, the public safety departments are about $15 million over what, under the 4088 settlement promise that we told them we would fund that. We're about $15 million over that amount in this fiscal year. So we are holding to our agreement, and in addition, we've added $15 million onto that agreement. Here's some more information regarding public safety costs. These are actually public safety costs that are not in the public safety budget units. For example, debt service of about net of $2.7 million is budgeted in our debt service, and that's a lot of that is for the sheriff jail, and we do get some reimbursement, and also for probation's JJC facility, juvenile justice facility. That's all budgeted in the general fund debt service fund. So,
$15 million gap between what is budgeted and what comes in. or what is required under our settlement agreement, correct?
That's correct.
For the 408. And the settlement agreement has specifies an inflationary factor.
That's correct.
And that inflationary factor, when it was figured out probably in July or June, is not the same as it is today.
Well, we do it once a year, so it would be,
But
we carry that
that's
over.
still true that we would be looking then at the next fiscal year, that is going to be a smaller number for budget.
I think that's probably a good guess. At this time, we would guess that would tighten up a little bit because of the fact that prior years, because there's a smoothing on how we allocate the general purpose revenues, there is a smoothing under that scenario.
So it wouldn't be a
That's correct.
significant change because of the smoothing.
It
But
may,
it will
it may or
probably
may
be
not be significant, but we would expect that to tick down a little bit. These are the other, like I was saying, the debt service and then vacation buy down, which is about $4.5 million that it's budgeted in special accounts and contribution. That also goes toward public safety. Required maintenance about $2.7 million that's budgeted in general fund required maintenance, and about $230,000 in another medical benefit for management. So these are the public safety costs that, almost $10 million of public safety costs that aren't even included in their budgets at this point in time. So
I'm just curious, why not?
Actually, they never. I think the idea with the debt service is that once your board makes a commitment that we think that's a good idea, that the debt service goes in the debt service, correct. The actual expenditures for vacation buy down go through the department, but we budget it in special accounts and contributions because it gives us better control over the dollars. Rather, if we try to budget in each individual department, there's a variation between who's going to use it and who's not going to use it.
You're saying the expenditures are processed through the department, but
the appropriations are in a separate
reside
budget.
in a central
That's
fund.
correct. That's correct, in the general fund. And what will happen is that when they actually do the buy down, the appropriation will move from our special accounts account and into the department's budget unit. So that's an automatic transaction. So that therefore the department gets the appropriations at that time, but it's not calculated into the overall 4088 calculation or any of those things. So.
It's my turn. We looked at what do we have to do in terms of new revenue. Now, one of the, we've talked about the fact that we don't have it in our current budget. Mr. Dursey and I were talking about the fact that we've got in general purpose revenue the growth of this year and what we're projecting for next year. And on the assessment of property, you're talking about a 2% growth next year and say 3.5% the following year. If in fact you did that, our growth in order to cover this project after that point would have to be 9% per year. And we've only had, I think, 2 years where we've had a 9% growth rate, something like that in the last, and that's during the height of the
Addiction to
yes, the addiction to credit. So we can't grow. We're not going to grow to the level that it would take to support this. So then we have to look at what are the ways that we can grow revenue to support this. And we looked at what does a 1/4 cent sales tax generate, a 1/4 cent sales tax generate for us, and it generates about 30 million, which, as you can tell, is in the ballpark of what we're talking about needing. If, in fact, we want to do that, it requires voter approval, and it would be voter approval of just over 50% plus one if it was a general statement. But if we go out and we say specifically that it is for a jail, it's my understanding at this point in time, if that's the way we do it, then a 2/3 vote is required. People have done some general purpose raising with an understanding that it is that's where the commitment is without asking it for it specifically. We also looked at, there's another approach, is property tax assessment an approach, and this is one that still needs to be further evaluated. But based on rounding of the number of parcels up to 250,000 parcels, it would take $140 per parcel to generate $35 million.
50% vote?
Yes, a 50% vote. Other financing issues that are out there are, of course, we might have an opportunity for some state bond funds, but there are lots of restrictions associated with that. There are some problems associated with, not the least of which, I guess, the folks who actually have received notice that they have achieved an allocation have not seen any money yet. So that's problematic. And as you know, the state itself is dealing with an $8 billion request for an investment in our prison system. And I believe that the sheriff is going to be talking a little bit about some of the ramifications of the prison system and the prison system growth or lack thereof and what the implications may be in the future for us. So the alternatives that we've talked about and that we have really are, can we cut expenditures? And it would be my position that we probably cannot, to generate enough revenue to, in fact, cover this. So if the other approaches do not work out, we are certainly in a difficult position. And we did have the opportunity of meeting with the sheriff and his senior staff and talking about this last Friday, and I know that he has some information that he wants to provide to us today. So, do you have any questions? We don't have any of the big answers. Yeah, answers. Or if you have any alternatives that we haven't thought of, we put our heads together and said, gee, is there anything else besides a miracle that'll work here? And we're not sure there is. So with that, concludes our presentation.
So, you got it. Bob?
Thank you, Chairman Foy, members of the board, and Ms. Robinson. I would never disagree with the CEO's office. I may politely inform them of some differences of opinion that we might have, but the conclusion's basically the same. The picture that the CEO painted in terms of the economic realities of the time, this is not the best time to ask for a jail or ask for staffing. I wish this conversation could have happened 2 years ago or probably 2 years from now, but the timing is what it is. And as we take a look at the presentation that's been made, there's really just one area, and Paul brought it up in terms of terminology, and I think terminology is really the difference. If you look at non-mandated programs, and you say a mandate is that you received a specific revenue source requiring you to do a specific function, assuring the registration and proper information of sexual offenders and elder abuse and child crime, crimes, those kinds of things are tied to a specific pot of money. You have to do it. It's a mandate. But if you look at constitutional mandates, it's the constitutional mandate of the sheriff, amongst other things, to investigate crime. You can't investigate crime without investigators. You can't investigate crime without a technical services bureau. You can't investigate and prosecute crime without a crime lab. So we consider them all mandated programs. About a quarter of that bureau is revenue offset. But predominantly the rest of the activity of the Bureau, with small exceptions, is part of the core constitutional mandate of the sheriff. So that's a point of disagreement, and as one example, major crimes, in addition to the other things that they do, they assure compliance of 450 registered sex offenders. They conduct 1,700 cases of child abuse, 120 cases of elders abuse a year. They do homicide investigations, narcotics investigations, major crimes, gang investigations, all of those things that are part of our core mission. And Supervisor Bennett asked about the regionalization of those services. When you talk about things like homicide investigations, primarily homicide investigations happen in our county areas. They don't happen in our contract cities. Contract cities like Thousand Oaks are large enough to have their own major crimes investigators. They usually don't conduct a homicide, but they usually don't have any homicides. So they're not much of an impact on us locally. We will also help cities such as Santa Paula that just may not have the resource. They're infrequent. It doesn't have a great financial impact on us, but we do provide that regional service. You could say the same thing going through that whole list of listed non-mandated programs. We have to conduct internal affairs investigations. We have to process backgrounds of peace officers by law. We have to do certain record functions. There are a lot of mandates inherent in all of those, and if you pull them out and pull the revenue offset programs out, you really wouldn't have very much left, and what is left becomes a political decision of the board. Historically, the county has supported cities in certain elements. that is a board discretion item, but we find that supporting each other, and the cities also support us, is mutually beneficial, and many of the costs begin to equate with time when you look at the services that go in both directions. When we take a look at the current position of the department, in 2002, 2003, we had 823 sworn deputies. We lost 92 of those positions. We've only recovered 16. We lost 100 civilian positions during the same time and recovered almost none of them. So we're substantially smaller than we were in 2002, 2003. Programs disappeared. Facilities were closed down during that period of time. All of those things that may have been discretionary or seem to be nice to haves and not have to haves, many of those fell by the wayside during those times. So we don't have a lot of options left. This year we're looking at absorbing $6 million in lost 172 revenue. Frankly, we don't have an idea how to reduce it that large. We'll do it. We'll make it work, but it's going to be a sacrificial measure on our part. And then if you look at the option one formula that was put up on the screen, that's another $5 million a year on top of what we're absorbing in lost revenue, on top of the future potential of contributing to the pension shortfall, which could be a very substantial increase. And I just don't know where we would get to the money to be able to address that. But that brings us to the point of agreement with the CEO's office on how difficult a financial decision that this is. We may disagree about the methodology, but obviously not only for our department, the other public safety departments, but also the other general fund departments. It's certainly a hardship. When we take a look at that, we have to interplay the operational realities, and that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. We would, in fact, the CEO and I were talking before this meeting about how nice it would be if we weren't dealing with the timing that we are in the economic crisis, but this is where we are, and we can't avoid it, and we can wish that it was different, but we're faced with the reality, and leadership means we have to address it in the middle of the crisis. We have 1,765 inmates in our jail system today. That's 354 in overcrowding, and overcrowding means double bunking in open, unsecured day rooms. It's made the jails dangerous. We're having to use 2 deputies to do section inspections anymore. We've had assaults on deputies. It's becoming tense and more violent within the custody complex, and we're having to increase staff and increase costs to be able to address the fact that we can't use the facility to secure the inmates anymore. They're out in open areas. We're only a few inmates away from getting to the point that we'll have to put inmates on the floor with a mattress and a blanket. The minute you do that, you're inviting a lawsuit, you get court intervention. Those kind of things could happen within a weekend or two at the rate that we're going. 80% of our population at this point are felons. 67% are unsentenced and ineligible for release, as determined by the courts. 99% of our jail inmates have been arrested on multiple charges. Rarely do you see a single charge. 75% have prior records. And of the 31,000 bookings that we do every year, all but 1,700 are released. So we're very aggressive in releasing everyone that we can to OR, to bail, to alternative sentencing. We want as many people out of the jail, and we want just the worst occupying those cells. But even with that, our population is growing beyond our ability to deal with it. There are costs in failing to act, as difficult as action would be at this point. The increase in violence, the increase in litigation, consent decree. We're also expecting 1,500 or more state felons to be released into our jurisdiction, many of which will come back to our jails in short order. The social cost of an early release, a premature release like they have in LA of crime, where offenders who would otherwise, at least the public would be protected from them, are back in the public, recommitting crimes, being rearrested, being re-prosecuted. And the diversion of cost to behavioral health, VCMC, and other social service agencies if people aren't in our jails. We talk about homeless programs and behavioral health programs. We're the biggest behavioral health program in the county. We're the biggest homeless program in the county. We treat those people well. We make sure they get care in our custody, but the numbers are going to go somewhere if they're certainly not in jail. The positive point is there are a couple of things we still can do, and we're not debating the crisis facing the county, and I don't think there's any debate about the real need that's facing the county in terms of the jail system. But there are some intermediate steps that we can take and some other things that we can look at, and the CEO listed one of them certainly on her chart. The first is we would like permission from the board to continue to pursue option 2 in the planning phases. Our concern is that we have a needs assessment that costs $270,000 to create. It's getting dated, the information's getting old. If we don't continue to work on it and at least move the ball down court, we're going to find that we're going to have to recommission another study, probably lose 6 months to a year in the process, spend the extra money, and be right back where we started. When we talk about the population differences, the slide indicated that option 2 was at 656 inmates. That does not include the medical component, which are not rated beds, so it's not counted in that number. But it's actually 704 total beds. With us being in an overcrowded situation of 354 inmates now, to add 523 beds years from now, we'd be in a crisis mode the entire time, even when we open the new facility. 700 beds would give us a little bit more of a cushion for the difference in cost. Now, we can't afford the option 1, so I'm proposing option 2. Obviously, I can't propose that without some revenue solution to it. And what we have talked about in some measure with the CEO is the possibility of the board and the public safety agency heads and elected officials taking to the public the opportunity to create an enhanced revenue situation through a number of different means that are available, to let them vote, let the voters weigh in on the issue of the quality of their public safety in Ventura County. We can make them aware of the problem. It's not a good time. Other people are going for increased tax measures at the same time. We don't have another solution to it. We can't wait till the economy turns around. We can continue planning, and hopefully we'll be able to do that, and hopefully we'll be able to continue planning towards option 2. But all of that is contingent on either an economic turnaround or an increased revenue mechanism of some kind that would be put to the voters, in short order, hopefully. So that's my presentation. We can talk about any of these items in more detail. We have we'll have a more detailed presentation to make to your board on questions that we haven't received yet. You have many of the answers to your questions before you, but we'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Anybody got any great questions? Great answers? What do you got? Okay. Thoughts? Go ahead. Yeah.
Just some minor questions. How far over capacity are you now? How many beds would you need today to be not
Today,
over
for
capacity?
every inmate to be in a bunk or in a cell, we'd need 354 more bed spaces, which means, because there are 2 per bed spaces, we'd have 170 some cells.
Okay. And then I really appreciate the page that you have broken down the mentally ill by diagnosis. And that is based on how do you come up with a diagnosis?
The diagnosis, we work with behavioral health. They work in our facilities. They're the ones in their medical staff that do the diagnosis.
Okay. But it looks like you have almost 600 mentally ill in prison, is what it looks like today. Or in 2007, when you did it, you had 600 people with mental illness. Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking, when we're looking at different options, an expansion of the jail is one, but if you were to, if the county had a locked facility for the mentally ill, which we used to have but don't have now, it is possible that you wouldn't be having those 600 then in jail, and they would be in a place where they're actually, what I think more getting the treatment that they need instead of just being maintained for your jail. So I was just thinking if that would have enough of a significant reduction in your jail population, that would be an option to looking towards expansion.
In talking to the judges, and the CEO and our staff met with the presiding court judge and the assistant, a locked facility would give them a little more flexibility. For most of the inmates with a mental illness diagnosis, the courts determined that they were aware of what they did when they committed a crime, should bear the consequence for that, and if they can receive proper treatment in a jail environment, in many cases that's preferable. So it's very hard to quantify. It would be not a large, and certainly not a majority of that population. It would be a small section that probably would be better suited in that kind of a locked facility.
And as I understand from the mental health board took a tour of the jail, that the recidivism rate for the mentally ill is higher than it is for the normal population. So at least maybe those ones that have the rotating door going in and out,
Right.
those would be ones that would be first addressed. But it would be interesting to see what the judges, if the judges would actually start sending more out to a locked mental facility than to jail if they had that option.
Right.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chair. I appreciate the comments from the sheriff, I appreciate the comments from the CEO and the background. This has been a healthy process that we've gone through. I feel like I have much better appreciation. And we all recognize we have incredible financial challenges that are out there. But what I think is even more incredible than the financial challenges is the spirit of cooperation and sort of collaboration on the solution here. I mean, to have the sheriff sitting here agreeing with the CEO that probably what we ought to look at is new revenue is the best thing that could happen to this county in terms of us being able to attack our problems. Whether we get the new revenue, whether we, however we go forward, it's just we're going to be much more successful this way. So my commendations to the sheriff and the sheriff's department personnel, and the same thing to the CEO. This joint recommendation you had talked about, asking for the board to authorize going forward with the study for two. The questions that I have are they're sort of detailed questions that my guess is, my sense is, I'm not opposed, but I would want some things to be checked out as we begin to go that way. For example, is if you spend the money on was it the feasibility study you said? I was trying to get down there.
Well, the needs assessment is what we already paid for. Right. Now, the next step is planning and design and beginning to move down the road in terms of preparation.
If you start that on option two, my question is, are any of those costs that could be available for an option one or a hybrid option one or something else? Or would we have to start all the way back over again if we found ourselves in a real crisis or the revenue thing didn't pass and we said we're down that road, in terms of that. So that's, I guess, what I think is the appropriate thing is for another conversation to take place, assuming the board says the revenue option, we hear the recommendation. How do you move forward in terms of what you're interested in doing is not letting it all get cold so that if we do get the new revenue, we're able to move. And at the same time, try to have that not be, we don't close any options off at the same time. So to the extent that can happen, I guess that's my sense in terms of a reaction. I don't know what the other supervisors think of. That's my sense in terms of a reaction to your request. The final thing that I'd like to offer out there, and I wish we had an audience of all 800,000 people in Ventura County to hear this, which is that when you get in these kind of tough situations where you're making a compelling case for why we need to expand the jail, and we're all making the compelling case that there isn't enough money to pay for a new jail with the current revenue that comes into the county, that's the time when people get the most creative. And I fundamentally believe that the average citizen in this county is moving to the point where they're saying, they really sort of are challenging us to find less expensive ways to incarcerate or whatever it is to protect them from people. That they're getting frustrated that jail costs are, the idea that every 15 years we're going to build another jail and add another $35 million in today's dollars to that budget. They're starting to go, is that viable? They're saying that statewide, and they're saying that here. So the challenge for all of us, and for not just us, but everybody, every citizen in the county, is let's come up with, let's keep thinking about creative ideas, and hopefully somebody can break through that. Is there a way we can provide more beds less expensively than this somehow? I don't know, and that's one option. The other, of course, is the things we talked about, alternative sentencing and all that stuff. But just straight providing the beds seems to be expensive from the public's perspective.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with you. And during this process, we will continue to examine with probation and the CEO's office and other affected agencies alternatives, because even if we do build, and even if we build option two, any alternatives we can find will extend the useful life of that facility. Sure. We don't want to have to come back again in 2015 and say we need another jail.
Sheriff, thank you. Appreciate the the information, and the earlier information I received, and I know other board members did too, on the details of what we have in the way of incarcerated individuals, and thinking that do we have individuals that have that committed one offense that you could do early release on, and then seeing that we don't. They typically have more than just one offense. But my question to you is, what authority do you have? How much early release can you do within your existing authority?
Well, that's part of the dilemma that we're in now. I have two ways I can release people from the jail. I can release them 5 days early on their sentence, which we've been doing for quite a while.
Right.
And there's a sheriff's parole board option, but people that would qualify for parole under that probably wouldn't be in jail at this point. They'd be under alternative sentencing already. So that's infrequently, if ever, used. Other than that, I have to wait for either somebody else to bring to the court a suit that results in a decree from the court, or I think there probably is even an option of us determining that it's too dangerous and going to the court and asking them to impose a cap. And we don't know technically how that works, or even if it's possible at this point, but we're examining it.
And a question for the CEO. Have we, I don't recall in recent years that we've done, excuse me, any real analysis on what a locked mental health facility would cost?
We did some a few years back, but I'd have to double check it. It seems to me we did one at...
Pull that off and dust it off and take a look at...
Yeah, about 4 years back or so.
Obviously, that requires revenue too, but we might want to look at that for a variety of reasons that would, one, give relief to the jail, perhaps provide a better model of care, but at what cost?
If I might, the Mental Health Services Act has a process for including the costs of an IMD. And I know that the process that we went through in terms of getting public input did identify that, and I believe it is in the plan, but it isn't a foregone conclusion. You have to meet certain requirements in order to use the MHSA money for an IMD. But I think that that is a lot better treatment model, obviously, than being in jail. And so there may be fundings for the actual building and operating, as well as we already pay to send patients out of county to locked facilities, and we would be paying less if we were to do that in county. So I think that's something we need to look at. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I don't know if you had...
No, that was...
The other thing that I would say, I would like to go down and get more information about the IMD option. But I'm also wondering, the majority of inmates are in there and they have not been sentenced yet. And some of that, as I understand, is because there's a delay in the court processing. And I'm wondering if there's something that we can do to assist that, maybe have a workshop and get a good understanding of what it is that is making it that, we have this delay. I don't know if it's common throughout other counties or if it's unusual here. But my other thought was that if the judges were to move these cases a lot faster, is there room in the state penitentiaries where these individuals would go? I mean, is that part of the problem too, that they can't be moved out because sometimes they'll say we're going to reject them if you try to bring them in. So.
Well, we have had that happen. We have had the state reject transfers from county jail, and they will pay for us to keep them in the county jail, but we don't have room for them, so it doesn't really help us at that point. And with what they're going through with the Coleman Plata suit and the reduction of inmates, at the best they will trade one for one. They'll take one in and kick one out and send it back to Ventura County. So that is a problem. The lack of courtrooms is a problem. We have DA staff is a problem. We've worked with the DA and the public defender on expediting some of the procedural obstacles to speed trials up. We've worked with our crime lab on speeding up process of evidence. All of those things have helped, but there's a limit on how much you can do with that.
That's what I would like to know. What is that limit? Because when we're talking about $30 million a year every year, when we can put $1 million into this and end up reducing the number of people in our jails, that would definitely be something worth looking at. So maybe something to look at in the future is a workshop on what is the logjam there and what can we do to assist that. Those are the two thoughts that I have.
We will include that in our report, answering the remaining questions that CEO is giving us.
I have a question on the pre-sentence, and it does seem like obviously it's the majority of the population we're dealing with. Is that common throughout the state, Sheriff, would you say it is?
I think it's becoming common because there has been a hardening of the jail population, over the years, and we have a notebook, if you want to hold up the notebook. This is the record of every inmate that we have in jail. And when you look through there, you will commonly find 6, 7, 8 violations, failures to appear in court, acts of violence that when you take it before a judge, when they see anything lesser, they'll be inclined to go for an OR, allow bail. But when they see this pattern of ignoring the justice system and the consequences of their failure of responsibility, they want them in jail, so they're going to show up in court, and so that the public will not be endangered by their presence on the streets.
You see a lot of stuff, and you travel the country and all this stuff. What are some of the other? Everybody's got to be dealing with this situation, I would imagine. Most of it. What are some of the outside the box things that they've done that kind of are on the edge? I mean, you hear about the guy in Arizona, kind of puts it on the edge and does some that kind of stuff. But what are some of the other things that maybe we haven't think, would be crazy for us to think about? But
well, your board had a presentation on that early in this session, and they pretty much covered the gamut of what's working in the industry. What's happening in Arizona is going to cost them probably hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits over time. Plus, it's inhumane, both to staff and the inmates. It results in much higher violence. It's dehumanizing, which isn't our intent. Our intent is to detain people, not to punish them. So, some of those things are off the board because they should be off the board. In terms of creativity, I think you've been exposed to the things that we find working, certainly working within the region, some to varying degrees of success or non-success. Santa Barbara has experimented with separate standalone facilities for people that are arrested just for drunk driving, lower security venues. People usually only spend 2 days in jail for drunk driving. But then you get into an economy of scale. Is it worth having a whole separate facility for just a handful of people that come through on the weekends? The economics starts to dictate that it's easier to centralize, and that's always been one of the arguments for a locked mental health facility. Unless there's another funding source, is like the state prison hospital that they're proposing, is far, far more expensive because you don't have economy scale. You have a relatively small group of people to work with. You still have to have the same medical, psychological resources and an infrastructure for maybe a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen people. Tends to not work out, and it's easier to centralize. And so we will bring those things to your attention as we come across them, but I think you've been exposed to the ones that are in the field.
What about on the other side? I don't know, you might have seen where universities do a lot of this, where they need to build new dorms or new building, and an investment group comes out and does that, and they do that, and they lease it back, do some things where they don't have the big capital outlay, all the expense, they get the tax write-off. Or where you have, I don't know, here, the opportunity, you've heard of, private prisons, all those kind of things. Now we're talking about jails, and I don't know if that's being done anywhere yet in the country at all.
Developers are happy to do that. They'll come in and build your jail and lease it back to you, because they want to keep their people working. They want to keep the machinery of their infrastructure going. They want to keep cash flow generating, and they have to do that for a lot of public buildings. So that's certainly an option with anyone you contract with.
Is it more cost effective than us building it because we don't private people building?
Well, the CEO's office would probably have to address that.
It's not a dissimilar model to what we do internally. We basically have the PFC do the borrowing, and we do a lease back arrangement, basically the same sort of model that you're talking about. Theoretically, regardless of whether you had a private entity do it or whether we did it internally, you still have to pay the lease payments. So it's a question of, are the lease payments, and we can look at what's being done privately, but...
Yeah, I've seen the university model. They do a lot of that now.
I was just going to say, this is not a generator of revenue, obviously, for the corporation that would come in and build it. What we've seen, we've worked with a number of these outfits that would come in and build your building and lease it back to you. We generally find that we can finance it a lot cheaper than they can finance it, because we can get the tax exempt borrowing. We don't have any profit going toward it. So they're always going to make a profit, and they're always going to do it. They can do it with tax-exempt financing. However, they can't do it as cheaply as we can do it in a tax-exempt financing mode.
But don't they build it cheaper than we can build it?
That would be an engineering issue, and they can probably do it a little quicker, but I think engineering, our Public Works is looking at some of these design-build options that would kind of incorporate that type of issue, where they would come and design and build, so that could be quicker and do it a little bit less expensive, but that would be the building side, correct?
Right. Okay. All right, well,
Thank you, Sheriff.
thank you. Thank you for the time and all the information. I guess we heard it again, but couldn't find a solution to it yet. There's always an opportunity.
Well, we still have a series of questions that are being looked at. I think we had a few other questions for some other things to look at. I would like us to constantly keep the issue of alternatives in front of us in case something pops up, some creative idea. I'm realistic that there's not likely that there's some magic bullet out there, but it's crazy not to keep looking at it when we're in this situation. And I would like to have a conversation take place between the sheriff and the CEO's office about sort of the specifics of moving forward with something.
Yeah, because we have a request from the sheriff to continue moving forward, so you can come back with that. Yes.
Well, a couple of things. CSAC conference is next week, so I'll do what I can to get any information or any idea. Obviously, the state's in horrible condition to think about whether there'll be another round of bond financing or if it's even something that we would be interested in because of the strings they've tied to the last one. And the new revenues. VCTC's in some limited discussion about new revenues. And although we were all a little surprised, I think, at the local jurisdictions who did pass new revenues, we're headed into another year or two of just horrible conditions. If you look at new revenues, 2010 is the closest horizon that you could look at, I think. If there's a special election in June, you couldn't do it that fast, but that'll just be for the state to bail out their circumstances. But I think we have to look at everything. Nothing's
Could I
off the
respond to
table.
that? Yeah, I'm not at all. I mean, we have a joint recommendation from the CEO and the sheriff to look at new revenue. I think that's just a given. Yes, I mean, I think, and I think.
Well, I think we have to explore it. It's,
And I guess I asked the question, how else do we get there? That's there is no other way. So it's, for me, it's just a question of when and what is it that
What
we
authority do we have to print money?
Not as much as the feds.
I'd also just like to say, while we're looking at, the need, because it's obvious, we've got crowded jails and they're not getting less crowded, they're getting more crowded, and the criminals are getting more criminal. But the idea that what we can do is do it in the best treatment way we can, between looking at, we've looked at some alternatives, ways to help reduce that recidivism, ways to look at, better treatment for the mentally ill. But this gives us some opportunity, even though it's a painful decision to make, but I think it also gives us this platform. We would not otherwise be here. And I think looking at the court backlog, what can we do to make this system work better on top of having to address how to reduce the jail population. So I think in a way that this is good for us to have these conversations.
Okay. What we'll do is we will look at the IMD. We will finish up the work related to the question list. We will meet with the sheriff and talk about how we can fashion something that we're comfortable moving forward with. And we will do some further analysis on revenue generation and what that means and what the timeline is and that kind of information about when you have to do what in order to, in fact, secure additional revenue and what else is going on out there that would, and the court backlog. Okay. Do we have it?
Yeah. I do want to get this said that I've always operated under the political assumption that if you don't specifically identify what you're going to do with the money, people are going to vote no. But I have been disabused of that. I mean, if there is good confidence in the elected officials and, and stuff, you just saw that in Oxnard. I mean, they went with a 50% vote and they got it. Before I'd almost dismissed that as, but I think that's not something we should dismiss, and it dramatically decreases the percentage you have to get, and I think probably you don't lose as many votes. You don't lose that 16 2/3 votes because you didn't identify if you structure it right, if you go about it right, et cetera. But we'd all have to go together arm in arm and really have a united front. But that's certainly, I want to make sure that stays clearly on the possibility side.
And one last thing, we don't have a date yet, but I'm working with Mayor Holden now that November's behind him to get this date on this VCOG-sponsored workshop on the state of law enforcement and needs in our county, so that we can have the dialogue with the cities and to hear from the sheriff and probation and PD and human services, hear from us as to what we have in the countywide challenges and the local police agencies. So should be in February.
Okay, so we have a receive and file. I have a motion for that? Make a motion to receive and file? You want to say something?
Second, and I just wanted to pass my thanks on to the sheriff personnel that came over and briefed me so efficiently on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. Next time you'll come and tell us how you solved it. Okay. Yes. Wow. Okay, we're going to go to number 26. And I appreciate the opportunity to present this. I know we had talked about not doing anything in regards to campaign finance until after the election. It is after the election, and I would like to, if possible, whatever we're going to do, try to do any of this, as much of this, whatever it is, before the next year starts, because there's a new election going on next year. And it's a difficult time to try to do it. But anyway, a couple things. One of the things, the reason that I'm looking at this, and I think we've all had questions about this, is that there is some things that maybe need to be adjusted, tweaked. One of the things that I'd like to say, though, is I know that the reason for this, I guess in the first place, was to, number one, going back to board letters, was trying to get single source large contributions out of the system, and I think that that was part of what had happened back in 2003 when this was done. And part of my understanding of that is that I think that's good. We don't want to do that. Part of the proposals I have here are not to move down that line and have single source solutions. One of the main reason for doing this is try to get some make elections more equitable, and that's really where I come from on this, in the sense that if campaign finance is so restrictive, it does not give the average person who wants to run the ability and to run, because it is not something that I believe that an average person, and I'm not talking an average person because we know that we've just seen a change in a supervisor here, but in that sense it was an anomaly. We have a candidate that was been in city council for a long time, has an awful lot of name ID, and have done that and spent a lot of time and years building that up. I'm talking about just the average person who decides it's important to run, believes they have the opportunity, that wants to do it and believes there's an opportunity to do it and can do a good job. And one of the reasons why you see some of these recommendations is not to take away what was already done, and I think there was some good work that was done prior, but part of this is just to try to get that equitable side of it come back, bring up some of these contribution limits to make them more equitable. I know some people have said, well, you get an awful lot of money going in there. I think it may be a problem, and I'm looking at that going, well, I don't see it at the state level, because we also have legislators who are having not this high have higher limits than this, and I don't think we look at them as being influenced. And I hope that we are not, the people that run for office are not influenced and say at $2,500 that they would be somebody that could be bought off or somebody. I think that's, hopefully we have better candidates than that. The other thing here too is to bring up the amount of money somebody could spend so that we could make sure it is enough that's there. And because we know if you don't take spending limits, that you're reduced in half of what you can contribute. So trying to bring those levels up so somebody can run a campaign and spend enough money to make it a valuable opportunity. There's been the idea that, or the thoughts and the comments of incumbent protection in our current plan, and I think in some senses you could say that, but I don't want to say that was the reason why anybody did it. It just, when it gets restrictive, people use those words, and I think that's important. I think the idea, though, that under this situation, we're not asking that we go to real high limits and go back to the idea where somebody can dump $100,000 into somebody's campaign and do that. I'm not looking for that. And there's a couple other things in here, too. There's people who would say, I want to run and I'm willing to put my own money into it, and I'm willing to make a loan to my campaign. One of the things we had before was a loan that was at $20,000, which, again, if somebody wants to make a campaign loan to their account, I thought was very low, and it also goes away. So they don't have the ability to recoup that. And again, it puts somewhat fear back in somebody saying, well, maybe I don't really want to run because it costs me and it's going to put me in a financial situation. I thought that we could increase those. An office holder account is something that is done by other supervisors in other counties at much higher levels than this, but I thought it was an opportunity to allow people, if they don't have any funds in their current campaign account after the end of an election, it allows them to have the ability for their contributors, people who want to contribute, want to see them in the public, because as you all know, there's a lot of things that you're called to and asked to do that are not county business, but the electorate wants to see you out in the public and doing certain things for them, and it gets very, very expensive. And if you have a campaign that has extra money, you can use that campaign. This was an opportunity for people who don't have that to allow them to get that and to have their own contributors put a little bit of money to a max of $5,000 during their term, and to allow them to use that so they could be in the public and do some additional things. The other piece here was this Ethics Commission. The Ethics Commission, as we know, has cost us an awful lot of money. Not that I don't believe it's not something that is useful. It's just that I think under the terms of what I understood, what it came to as a voluntary group of attorneys that were going to do this, we found that didn't work. We had to pay people, and it got very, very expensive. And it continues to cost us money every single year to do this. And I look at the total of over the last few elections that we've had about 15 complaints, and we've had two penalties, for about $1,754. But we've spent over $500,000 on this. So I look at that as do we really have a problem? And I don't know. Maybe there was a lot of abuse. There was problems prior, and we needed something like this. Or in order to have a campaign finance, we had to have some type of an ethics commission. So I looked at that as something saying, do we really want to spend the money? Especially in this day and age, we're trying to save every dime we can. We just hear of a jail, and I look at that as an opportunity for us to say, if we don't have to have something like this, especially since maybe we don't have abuse. I look at this and say only 2 fines were imposed during these last few elections, and we spent, again, over $500,000, $500,000. Is it something that really needs to be there? So that, again, my basic thought on this is that we would have much more equitable elections, allowing people the opportunity, especially people who don't have a big name ID and are trying to find, they believe they can run and want that opportunity. And this is where I'm looking at. Not that the other campaign levels we had were, so low, because there's some that are that low. We've looked around, but the idea that we could be a little bit more open, because incumbency has such great advantage. And I think it's important that we don't take advantage of the other people out there who want to run by using the incumbency. Everybody already has a big disadvantage because of incumbency, and I want to give people the opportunity. So anyway, those are my comments. I've also, if you need to, I brought a copy of the current ordinance, so if somebody wanted to look at what's already there. I think we've tried to put as much as we could in there. There you go, man. So, that's my comments. I know the paper, this is the current what's there. All right, sir.
Sure, I'd like to respond. I took the unusual step of actually writing it all down because I want to make sure I got this right, because I think this is really an important issue. So pardon my reading off of this. I'll try to respond to a couple of the comments that you made also. But there are two ways that this modification of campaign finance reform law could have come before this board. One way was the way I thought we'd agreed to last spring, which was that we were going to identify one meeting date where all of us would bring all of our ideas forward and we'd examine them and debate them all at the same time. The other approach is the one that we're using today, where one supervisor brings forward an item, of a series of proposals, and for us to vote on one way or the other. Both approaches have their merit and are legitimate. The latter approach is the one that you've selected, combination as the chair of the board and as a board member who could bring us forward. So I want to respond to this proposal, and I'll bring my own modifications and suggestions for changes forward at a later date, since that's the protocol that we've established for this. But plain and simple, I think this proposal essentially guts campaign finance reform in Ventura County and the whole purpose of campaign finance reform. Today in America, money is tainting virtually every aspect of the political life. This proposal is a campaign finance reform that benefits the rich and powerful special interests that can make these $2,500 contributions, not our average citizens. The fundamental purpose of contribution limits is to increase people's confidence that big money interests do not have undue influence in the process. Your claim in the newspaper this morning that this is an Incumbent Protection Act, our current ordinance, right, is just simply typical of the diversion used by opponents, both when we tried to institute this and now, and I think in this case it's used to weaken the ordinance. That argument will weaken the ordinance so that essentially it's a law that only offers lip service to campaign finance reform. I think it's preposterous to suggest that our current ordinance is an Income Protection Act, and I'd like you to just look at this one slide, an Incumbent Protection Act, thank you. And I'd like you to just look at this one slide, please, right? All right, good, that's the only slide I have there, right? We looked at it really fast, right? Here we go. All right, go ahead, put this there. In the 15 years prior to us passing our campaign finance ordinance, no incumbent was defeated before we did campaign finance reform. In the 5 years since the ordinance had been passed, 2 incumbents have been defeated. And I might point out, one of those incumbents, Judy Michaels, was defeated by 2 candidates, one who accepted the contribution limits spending, D'Antono, and the other, yourself, who did not. Both of them defeated her in the primary. And then in addition to that, we had Supervisor Flynn defeated here by Councilmember Zaragoza. So if the passage of this law has been, I just think the evidence is clearly not there. For 15 years prior, it was hard for people to take on incumbents. This ordinance has not somehow made that not work when you look at this. If the issue of decreasing the corroding influence of money in politics wasn't so important, I'd say you look at this and it would be laughable to say this is an Incumbent Protection Act. I just don't see it from that perspective at all, but it is the argument that's always used. Campaign finance reform is really complicated because the courts have issued a series of nuanced rulings that require us to create a whole series of steps if we want to accomplish the goal of decreasing the corroding influence of money in politics. And that's what the purpose of campaign finance reform and campaign contribution limits are. The purpose is to decrease that influence of money in politics. There are important reasons why our ordinance started with a $700 contribution limit. There are important reasons our ordinance restricts a donor from also sending contributions on to other PACs and other organizations that are also contributing to that same candidate. There are important reasons our ordinance has restrictions on allowing someone to give themselves a large personal loan to their campaign and then be paid off later after the election by large contributions from large contributors. There are important reasons our ordinance has an independent enforcement provision. Those reasons are important, and they are dismissed here without any viable explanation outside of our current provision may be an Incumbent Protection Act. A $2,500 limit means a married couple could contribute $5,000 to a candidate. Now, the maximum size of a contribution limit should be something I think that our average citizens can relate to. And $2,500 is a limit that the average citizen could not give, no matter how committed they are to a candidate. This is a limit designed to benefit well-off donors, not the average citizen in Ventura County. The maximum size should be something that increases confidence that an elected official's decision is not going to be influenced by a contribution. And again, we see oftentimes couples out there and in contributing, couples out there trying to influence things. And going to $2,500 doesn't increase the public's confidence that money won't have an undue influence in the process. The changes to the loan provisions allow for a candidate to loan himself significant sums of money. Then after the election, when people have already voted, he can raise funds from those same interests to pay off that large loan. There does need to be better cost containment with the enforcement side of our current provision. But there should not be the complete elimination of an independent review, which is what is used in most of the places where there is effective campaign finance reform. We just saw in this country a tremendous grassroots revolution in the Obama campaign, where millions of citizens gave small amounts of money to a candidate. It was inspiring, and I think it was inspiring for many people, even people that were not Obama supporters, because nothing could be better for democracy, nationally or locally, than having candidates funded by large numbers of small donors. And nothing has been more corrosive in the history of our democracy than just the opposite. A select few wealthy, powerful interests funding being the primary funders of someone's campaigns. Our current law is a good faith attempt to move us towards that better place where a larger number of smaller donors fund candidates' campaigns. The evidence is clear. Our current law is not an Incumbent Protection Act. But I believe if this proposal passes, we can fairly call it the Help Big Money Back into County Politics Act. And I passionately oppose changes, the changes that are presented for us here, in case you didn't realize that I was passionate.
I didn't notice that.
Thank you.
Very good. Good explanation. I appreciate you doing it. Let me answer a couple of those. Well,
I do have, if I could just respond
Sure.
to a couple of comments you made now that I read the comments, and that is that there's this issue of, well, how does an average person, do this? Well, here's where that argument goes. An average person with few contacts and not much money is going to have trouble getting elected in whether you have contribution limits or not, because they're going to have to challenge. Somebody is going to have relationships with people that are traditionally the big funders, particularly in local elections. You know who those people are. They're traditionally the same people over and over again, the same interests, the same organizations. That average person's either going to earn the support of those people, or they're going to have to take them on, and they're not going to have that big money. They are actually disadvantaged. They're actually advantaged if you have contribution limits, because the other candidates, if you have small contribution limits, because the other candidates are limited to that same small contribution base. The average person has a better chance of finding a bunch of people to give them relatively small contributions than going out there and finding those people at the larger level. To use our state legislators as the example of it working when we have as dysfunctional of a state assembly as we have right now in terms of things being held up. I think the state assembly is locked up by special interest. If there is a place where big money has too much influence, it is Sacramento, where their contribution limits, where they have contributions limits, like you said. In fact, really though, the Assembly and the Senators have lower per person for the number of constituents in their district. Their contribution limit of $3,500 is actually lower than this would be per person, since we have about 160,000 people in each of our districts. And there's all kinds of issues about raising money year-round for the full 4 years, which is one of the other issues. So that hopefully I'll talk about more of those positives at a later date when I have suggestions. So,
Okay,
again,
thank you, appreciate it. Let me make a couple comments here. You say it guts this reform. I don't believe it guts the reform at all. Because again, going back to what it does do, it allows people the opportunity to go to a few of their friends, a few of their people, and get a little bit more contribution. Again, if we look at, I guess maybe I have a different mindset that if we believe that $2,500 or $1,000, because I guess you look at your own campaign, I looked at my own campaign, you may get a whole bunch of people that just max out. I think the average person doesn't, like you said, doesn't max out. And I think that what that does is it gives those people who want to come in saying, yeah, I've got these 10 friends, these 5 friends who are going to help me through this, and it helps me get into this whole thing and make something happen. Because like you said, if a person does not have the opportunity through a big base or anything else, as an incumbent does, they don't have the ability to move forward and try to work this. And what I'm trying to say is that is a disadvantage to the average person. Now, I don't know if you could say over the years here, we've had a lot of bad influence. I know in Supervisor Parks' campaign, I heard at one time somebody gave $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 in a campaign. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're trying to keep limits very low. Where at that point, somebody putting $100,000 in a campaign is a very large contribution. I think that's a major problem. But on the other side, the idea that an average person, you've got a few people who want to do this, and if we're saying $5,000 for a family or $2,500 for a person is a lot of money, I don't see that as something that really works. And then you brought up your situation here. I look at that as there's a couple anomalies there. One is we had 3 people in a race in my race, and that's what brought a difference in that race. There's no question about it. I'm not sure if I stayed out of the race where that race would have gone. It would have been a little bit different. The other thing I get to also in Supervisor Flynn's race, again, we had a person with a long-term history of being in local office that had a name recognition and did that. Now, if that's what we're trying to do, if that's what we want to say, we'd like to have these kind of people only that have gone through that process, I believe, then okay, maybe that's different. But when you go down this path, you say only the wealthy, this really helps the wealthy. I see it the complete opposite way. If you don't have money, I mean, it's very difficult to put your own money in. If you have some money, you can put your own money in and you can do that yourself. Well, I'm not sure we only want the people that have their own money to run. I think we should broaden that, and everybody should have that opportunity to run. And that's why I look at this as an opportunity to try to broaden that a little bit wider. I don't believe that $2,500 or if it's $2,000 or whatever is that kind of influence. I mean, if it is, then I think that's a problem. And also look at some of the stuff we talk about the state assembly as these contributions have caused problems. I'm not sure that's caused a problem. We have term limits that are very short that don't allow people to do some things there. There's no question that's caused a lot of problem, and if there's big money. I'm looking at, when I talk about what the state was doing, I'm just talking about the difference of $3,600 versus $2,500. I'm not talking about all the other things they deal with. And raising money year-round is not something we should be doing as supervisors either. We have, I think, an issue that you could maybe extend that a little bit longer, but make that happen. I don't believe we have to do that. So I look at this situation, and with the ethics side of it, I'm not looking at ethics as a bad situation. I'm just saying, are we going to spend a lot of money and are we going to get something out of it? That's part of my thing, is that if there's abuse, you need to deal with it. If we don't have abuse, then should we be spending 50, 100? I don't know what it's going to be this year. I don't know if there's any complaints in the elections this year and how much we're spending, but hopefully there's not, and hopefully we're not spending money. But if there is, do we want to do it? It just didn't work out exactly the way we thought. We didn't get volunteer attorneys. We ended up spending an awful lot of money. We did have some issues that, as we saw when one of the people came up before us, the thing ran on and it cost everybody a lot of money, and those aren't good. That's not good for us. But I got to differ with you in the sense that it does not got what we already have. And because again, I look at this and talking to other people saying, you know, you've got a county with almost 1 million people in it. You should be at a position where somebody can run a campaign, and that's where I look at that. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to take from the standpoint that the incumbent protection that you use as a negative, I don't want to use that as a negative, because there is incumbent protection just by being an incumbent, right? You have all that.
That's 15 years.
Exactly. You're right. You have that. Now, I don't know during that 15 years if any candidates that came up, if there were situations that candidates were in trouble and we saw changes. I don't know during that time. But all I'm saying is that I believe that we should try to, I just want to get down to the basic lower, the common denominator that the average person who's going to try and wants to work, we give them an advantage. That's where I come from. So anyway, another question over here. Yes.
But I would just say that the problem as I see it is keeping big money out of campaigns, and that was the basis for the campaign reform ordinance, not that it's, and calling it an incumbency protection ordinance, I think this clearly shows that isn't the case, because since we've had the ordinance, we have lost 2 incumbents. But my concern is that we don't want campaigns for the rich, and you did mention I had an opponent who received a $90,000 check. At a time when I limited myself voluntarily, because there weren't campaign limits, to $500 a contribution. Your proposal would make it allow for 5 times the amount of money that you can loan yourself, 2 times more the amount that you can spend, and almost quadruples the amount a contributor can give. So it does undoubtedly increase the amount of money. You mentioned that you don't think someone could get bought off for $2,500, or if it's a couple, $5,000. Currently, state law requires if you sit on LAFCO and someone gives you a contribution at $250, you have to recuse yourself. And it is a perception of conflict of interest. It's not necessarily a conflict of interest, but there's that perception. And so $250 from the state is a potential of getting someone to be corrupted. So to me, certainly 10 times that would increase that even more. Supervisor Bennett mentioned that he would like to bring forward some changes to the ordinance that he's thinking of. I have some too, and mine are to look at actually closing some loopholes and tightening it up. But I think if you're going to come forward with one, you're coming forward with one, I just don't think that's a good process for it, and I would hope that we make confirm our previous decision to bring it forward, all of us together, and work on it together. Other things that you suggest, such as office holder accounts, I call them slush funds. We had a city council member in Thousand Oaks who had up to $150,000 in his office holder account. And it was all contributed by developers and contractors and people who wanted favors from the city council. We eliminated office holder accounts. That council member voted against that, but we were able to eliminate it. And I think bringing them back again would be a big mistake here. I don't think increasing the amount of money you can spend will help even the playing field, and that's the whole point of this. It makes campaigns more expensive, and it's actually a disincentive, I think, for people to get involved in campaigns. They go, oh my God, I'm going to need, how much now? $600,000 if I'm going to try and be a viable candidate. I mean, those kind of things are disincentives. And I look around this room and I think, how many in here have given a $2,500 contribution to anyone? Any candidate. Maybe, if you're a millionaire, you can do something like that, but I think the average person certainly doesn't give $2,500 to a candidate. And so maybe it's those people who have the highest incomes, may know individuals who can give $2,500, and you said maybe you have 5 or 10 friends that can get you in the race. I really think it's doing pounding the sidewalks, getting out there, meeting people, getting contributions, doing the grassroots efforts, doing those things that get you recognized in the community. Those are the kind of people I think that you want to see representing you. And I really think that we need to allow the little guy the opportunity through hard work, volunteering, and lots of small contributions to have an ability to run for office. This will be a disincentive for the average person to run for office. Eliminating the Ethics Commission, to me, here you are, here's the proposal to increase the amount of money, which can increase the corruptibility, I believe. Make a new, what I call slush fund, a new account, which historically have conflicts in them, and then eliminating the oversight body at a time when you're increasing the amount of money and making these other funds. To me, it's just it is a recipe for where we were before we had campaign reform. So I too am opposed to weakening the campaign reform ordinance. I actually would like to tighten it, and those are my comments.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you making those comments. I think for clarification, we weren't talking about going to 600. We were talking about 300. Those are countywide offices for that larger amounts. But
I guess you would double the amount of money you could spend.
well, I think we're up to $173,000. So yeah, it'd be. One of the things you look at, again, it goes back to that thing. I guess I don't look at the idea that at $2,500 somebody is being corrupted. The idea the state may say $200, that's fine, or $250. They want somebody to know that somebody's giving you money. That's fine too. I don't think if that's an issue to me. I wouldn't. If they do it here, it's not the end of the world to me. I think everybody should, because it's all public knowledge, right? On any kind of report, everybody's making that public. I think that's clear.
But on that, would you require a seated supervisor to recuse themselves if they've received a contribution from the person coming before them for a development waiver, or the contractor that works for him who will get money from it? That's what this is about. It's not just declaring it, it's actually not being able to vote because you've taken money.
Well, I guess it goes back to that idea is at what point, I guess the state you're saying in that is saying 250 is the point where at 249, we believe you're not corrupted. At 250, you're corrupted, so you can't say something. That's an issue for me that I guess maybe I have a little bit more faith in human nature on this stuff. And when you call a campaign or a separate account a slush fund, and first of all, it's $5,000 for 4 years. It's not a lot of money, and people have already made contributions. You can't go more than what your already contribution is. It's there. Part of that issue is I found some people, have heard, well, it's too expensive to go here. You can't do all these other things. And some people have money in their campaigns. They can do it because it's not any different than having money in your campaign.
The office holder account, though, what gets me is that, let's say that it's, because I've come from an area where this occurs, let's say there's a developer who wants to give you money, you're not running for office, he can give you money the day before you vote on his project, the day you vote on his, or even the day after you vote on his project. I just feel like you shouldn't be taking money from individuals when you don't need to. And certainly we haven't needed to.
Well, I'm not saying you need to. I'm just saying, other counties do this. LA has $75,000 they do that with. It's part of their whole thing is to make sure they can be out in their community being available in all the different events and different things that need to be there. It's we don't want the taxpayer paying for the events that are that the people that elect you want to see you at.
Christine won't let us.
I know. Exactly.
Christine won't let us.
Exactly.
Just Supervisor Parks, the LAFCO rule is 12 months, and it's actually not recused. It's you have to reveal it at the dais when it's being brought before you. No, I think so, and we don't need to debate this right now because it's really not. I think one, I can't support this either. And what's awkward is how do we said that we want to make some changes, and we want to do it before the next election cycle, and we do need to do that. Right. So we do need to have this discussion, and so how do we do that with, should we all say, pick a date, and we're all going to bring forward our ideas on the same agenda, and then
hash through them.
I don't
So
know,
it's
we
awkward.
tried that with commissions. It's taken almost a year and a
Yeah, I
half, 2
know.
years to
And,
do. It's
and it is
real problem.
awkward, but it is something we did have the discussion that we were going to work on this together. So,
Well,
I think.
Right, and I didn't want to bring this for not with, that's why I wanted to bring these different options so we could start a discussion on this and has an opportunity
Yeah.
to say, are these things we can do?
And I think as importantly as what the content of an ordinance is the public perception. And it really does matter to the public. I saw it, I've seen it repeatedly in my 2 election cycles now that have occurred under the ordinance. And prior to that, I think there was a clear interest in the public, particularly at the local level, that folks want to see us be reasonable and have campaigns that are still very grassroots. And I have, when I first ran, I was not an elected, but I did have some name ID because of being a chief of staff, but I was not an elected, and it took me 18 months to get through that election, and it was torturous, and raising money was not, I don't think anyone sits up there and says they like to do that. And so, looking at an amount that's
But
reasonable.
you might have had people that helped you because you probably didn't have campaign finance in that situation.
No, I was in that gap where there wasn't the campaign finance. That's correct.
Had a couple people that friends and.
But I looking back on that and looking in the last 2 elections, I have very few contributors in the top bracket. Very few.
I think nobody.
Because I just hate asking for it, but very few. But I think that's okay. I think it's important that that we have more. If you're going to run for a public office, you have to feel like you can talk to those folks you're going to represent, and they can talk to you. And it isn't a matter of buying your time with them or them buying time with you. And I really don't like to say that anyone can be bought for whatever the amount is.
Agree.
And obviously, in some cases, the public doesn't care either. When you see the last scourge of horrible mailers that we got that so-and-so took $50,000 from a tobacco company, and yet the public votes them in.
Right.
I don't know what at some point sells the public that you're either bought and sold or you're really doing what you need to do to run a successful campaign to get elected, so that you can carry forward the wishes of the public and the public policy development. I really don't want to go through pieces here. Other than I disagree with the limit. Well, and then I'm going through these now. I disagree with the limit. I think that's too much, too much of a reach. And I'd like to, have, and we need to have further discussion. But I don't want to. I think we need to continue that discussion and not try and craft the answers off of what you've submitted here, Supervisor Foy, and
Okay.
not to be obstructionist at all, but to say that the campaign ethics thing is important. I think again for the public, no question, the cost we have to look at reform to keep the cost down. I think we had initial startup cost. I don't believe we've had significant cost even in the last 2 years on this, but yes, there were some startup costs. And I talked about early on a office holders account, and when I think about setting some restrictions for a 4-year office holders account that would say you have to have that established within X amount of time, and it abides by whatever limits we have, and I mean you could put restrictions on it so it's not a slush fund. Thinking about all those things out of pocket that we often may contribute to in order to go to activities in our district because of new regulations that restrict some of that. I guess we just have to think about how do we move forward from here.
Look at this in the sense that it sounds like we're not going to get agreement here on anything, so why don't we try to set some time that we could come together, have some, and I don't know how you're going to do that, because we don't have the ability to talk with each other behind closed doors anyway, so we can't do that. So we have to bring some ideas, and unless there's some to come up within a 60-day period of time. I personally don't want to get too close to another election with this, and I think
I
that's
agree.
part of my thing is to move this. But it sounds like with everybody bringing their, I don't know how you'd accomplish that. Again, we did that with commissions, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of process, and I just want to be careful that we don't run into a situation we tried before, and then we got too close to elections, so we put it off and put it off. And because we know there's some things that need to be done. Yes, sir.
Well, if I could, I think this is completely different than the commissions. The reason the commissions thing is so complicated is the very first time we did it, we actually brought the commission and the commissioners in here to plead their case. Well, that's going to take you forever if you got 60 commissions. That's not what would happen here. There are some pretty straightforward, simple parts of the ordinance that need to be reviewed. We all probably have some opinions about it. I think it would have been very easy to have just said, to have announced sometime, hey, if the election's over, you know, I'm going to put this on the agenda. Anybody else wants to have their stuff, put it out there so it's out there. That's not the approach that we ended up taking here. So I think I'm not now in favor of saying let's pick it. I'm just saying when we're ready, we'll come. You know, and bring the proposal. I think we're identifying sort of the major issues as we're having this conversation as we go forward. So that's my sense in terms of where to go forward. It's just very different from the commissions. We could easily have put what limits. The Ethics Commission, you know, your loan, we could put those 5 or 6 things up. We could have the discussion. We'd be able to do this, I think, very easily in one meeting, and I think we probably still will. Supervisor Parks already sort of verbally identified some of the things that she has some interest in, you know, and there may be some others for that to happen. The other thing that I want to get said, because it continually comes up, and that's this argument that, you know, if you have the contribution limits, then the only person that can challenge the incumbent is somebody so wealthy that they can self-fund, and if you're not wealthy enough to self-fund, then you're out of luck. The reality is that's not what is actually happening out there. Number one, you know, people talk about incumbents, you know, and there's some protection of incumbency. First, you got to ask yourself, how did the incumbent actually get the job? The person has a certain built-up advantage because they were in a strong enough position to get elected in the first place, and so somebody has to overcome that. Whatever perception somebody has of Peter Foy and Linda Parks and Kathy Long, you've got to overcome that positive perception that people have, and that's not because you're an incumbent. It's because you had that perception, and now there's some name stuff that gets out there and all that stuff. So incumbents have that, and it's not related to campaign contribution limits. I would offer you, and we saw this happen in the city of Ventura. The city of Ventura, we passed contribution limits, and it was $100 and $200. $100 if you didn't take the spending limits, $200 if you took the spending limits. And there was an explosion in people interested and a dramatic decrease in the amount of money that was spent in the next election. So the average winners spent over $35,000 to get elected, right? And the average citizen in the city of Ventura said, man, how do I come up with raising $35,000? Because that's what the average candidates were winning with. We passed campaign contribution limits. A number of people ran, and the average winning candidate spent $15,000. And citizens said, you know what, I think I can find $15,000. There's some way to do this. I would offer what is so, what is so problematic with your proposal in terms of the $2,500 and having these limits get out of hand, is in local politics, the largest funders, consistently, year in and year out, the largest block of people that are funding are people in the pro-development industry. They have an interest and they are involved. It's very legitimate for them to be able to do that. So somebody that is tied there, or anybody else that can find 20 couples that could give them $5,000 each, whether that's 20 people tied to the development industry or 20 people on whatever, right, is going, there's going to be a group of people that can plug into that. But the average citizen, if you ask them out there, can you plug into that network? The average citizen says, no, I can't plug into that network. And so they are more discouraged from running, more discouraged from getting involved, the higher the limits go. The lower the limits, the more they say, you know what, I can find 50, 100, 200 people that'll give me a smaller amount. but I can't find those $5,000 couples out there. And so I appreciate that you sincerely believe that. I just have a completely different perception about what the average citizen sees with that contribution. The average citizen sees that $2,500 contributor out of range, either because they don't know very many people in that category, or they're not plugged in to the traditional interest that get involved in local campaigns. And that's not just the development interest. There are a number of others. There are unions, et cetera, which is why I think the best thing to do is what I do, is that is if somebody has a specific interest and they have a county contract, they're going to have a development project come forward, just even $700 is a problem, so I don't take it, and that's what would be nice, but we can't pass a law to do that. If we could, the public would, we'd have a huge support for that if we could get that law to pass, but we can't, so we're constricted by what the courts do. But you raise those limits up, you discourage that average citizen far more than you encourage that average citizen. You encourage that citizen that has that contact to that special sort of group of people that want to contribute. So, thank you for letting me.
I appreciate your comments. There's no reason for us to go back and forth on a couple. But let me just say one, though. But I do believe on the other side, somebody's going to think a sitting supervisor is going to have a lot more contacts, and I don't think that development community is going to contribute to an outside supervisor thinking that if the person doesn't win, I put myself at odds. So I think there's some of that they wouldn't do. And I know myself, I didn't take any money from developers myself. So I think there's, but again, just disagreements on where we go with that. But listen, this isn't going to go any place, it sounds here, but if there's an opportunity for us to find a way to bring this back under some other terms that we could have everybody's input, that's fine. I don't know. Anybody have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to close this by making a motion to reject the proposal that we have in front of us, so that we're just clear about that, I think, as we go forward. So that would be my motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Okay. So where do we go then on the rest of this?
I think just you've established protocol. We said we were going to come after the election. You came with the proposal. I think we just, as other supervisors are ready, they come with their proposal. I think it'll be easier to be clear on where else this is going to go.
Well, and we all have the goal to do this before the next election cycle, well before. So I would agree that at this point we just have to, as ready supervisors bring forward ideas, some that may take variations of what you put forward here, give us something to start with, or not, and just keep at this till we find something that sticks, till we get the votes.
That's fine. I just think we do have to do something as soon as possible.
I agree.
All right, thank you. All right. We have nothing else? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Oh, yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Have a good break, huh?